Everyone, welcome to another edition of Unpopular Opinions. I'm joined by D as ever. How you doing, D? I'm probably about 7 stone heavier than last time you spoke to me due to Christmas. What about you?
Oh dear, all the mince pies. Yeah, I'm just imagining all that shop we looked at, just going straight into your gob. I'm doing well. Hail and well met.
I do. Before we introduce the guests today, I need to apologise to Heston Blumenthal. Do you remember I was dissing his £7 mince pies, which were actually reduced from £11? Well, Mrs. AA went in there to do them, and she discovered, hidden at the back of the pack, a special little sachet of carrot sugar. And if you sprinkle that carrot sugar on the Heston Blumenthal mince pies before you put them in the oven, it does something magic to them. It transforms them, and it gives them a wonderful kind of smoky flavor. So they were actually really nice in the end. So
anything that requires sprinkling carrot sugar on it, yeah, especially a mince pie. No, sorry, that's absolutely cursed. You know.
So I will introduce some of the other guests. I'm also joined by a mysterious fellow called Carl. Say hello, sir.
Hello.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, etc.
And to you.
And how are you doing?
Very well. Very much looking forward to, I suppose, metaphorically, I have to say, trouncing you, severing your head in this debate, and carrying you back as a trophy.
However,
I didn't do any preparation, though, so it might not happen.
I know you're a bit of a kind of fitness freak these days. So, hopefully you went unscathed by the onslaught of Christmas food.
Yeah, well, I haven't eaten like any carb-based foods for ages now, and so I wasn't really tempted over Christmas because your taste buds change. And I don't really like the taste of sugar anymore. It's kind of disgusting. I actually I don't drink milk anymore. Not because I can't. I actually can because it's fairly low in sugar generally. But it's got enough sugar in it that it just tastes really sickly sweet, and it's kind of gross. And so I have like 0 sugar almond milk or something now. But the thing is that tastes like regular milk now. So it's like. The only thing that tempts me really is bread and mince pies. I really would like bread and mince pies, but the thing is, I think I would like bread and mince pies. But if I ate one, I'd probably actually not like it. But no, I was relatively unscathed.
Now, I will say I've started a bit of weight training since the start of Christmas Eve. I'm just doing this 20-minute thing. So far, so good. I feel like I've already reached the stage where I can go up a weight, And also joining us is apostolistic. God, is Keith? Say hello, Keith.
It's a prophecy.
Okay, I'm Keith for this evening. Although I would love AA to try and pronounce my name every time he interacts with me. Don't have to though. Don't worry.
Good Christmas.
Oh, wonderful Christmas. Thank you. Lovely time just to forget about all the madness that's going on at the moment.
Also joining me is Charlemagne, who's come in at the last minute as my tag partner for this debate that we're about to have. Sorry to do this to you, Charlemagne, but I had nobody.
It's no big deal, I mean, we were talking about fitness. I was actually planning on doing some weightlifting during the stream since... someone needs to be doing something productive, and I'm not sure that I'm going to change those plans. So, might be a little distracted.
Yeah, you may have to do the heavy lifting for AA, Charlemagne.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, I can offer some quips at least, because I know less about the Byzantines than I do the Romans. So we'll see what happens.
Every once in a while, Hulk Hogan would have to take a loss, right? So what they do is they set up a tag team. And he'd get in his friend to the end, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, who would take the pinfall for him. So that's hopefully what is going to happen here. All right, but before we get going, I did want to share this. So just to explain, the main event for today's show is going to be a debate about the Byzantine Empire. Was it really Roman, though? Okay. Was the Byzantine Empire really Roman? Now, there are some strange people who are really passionate about this topic, who believe that yes, in fact, the Byzantine Empire was really the quote-unquote Eastern Roman Empire. I, on this stream, are going to prove that such arguments are based on logical fallacies, and they cannot possibly be true. Sargon and Keith here are going to argue the opposite, so that's going to be interesting to see. But before we get there, I just want to share this thing that the UN Women put out, because this is something that I really thought that Carl might want to see here. This is something that the UN Women put out, and it really is. I mean, for a start, I mean, Dee, you're the artist. This
Unstereotype Avenue. Toxic masculinity recycling plant.
Oh, it gets worse.
Inclusion Square, Freedom Avenue, Education Boulevard, Equal Representation Avenue. My God, I told you this stuff was going to take over the world, didn't I?
Hasn't it already happened in... Sorry, Carl. Hasn't it already happened in Birmingham?
Oh, it's already happened everywhere, but like this diversity nonsense, I told everyone, it's going to be everything. Everything's going to be this. And this is the world they want. How many people here are disabled, actually? I can see three...
on the stream or in the image?
In the image. Like, seems just...
I calculated that there were 73 people in this picture, and there are 6 disabled people.
Right. So what's the representation that's usually in the population?
So usually it's about 1%, but 8.2% of the people in this picture are...
so the UN women are going to get crippling, is what you're saying?
Well, they're basically going to times the amount of disabled people by 8. But
I mean, for that.
There are really some horrible things in this.
It reminds me of that Kurt Vonnegut story where you have to be sort of hobbled. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, Harrison Bergeron,
yeah.
With the handicapper general.
I just want to draw your attention to some really horrible parts of this. One, as many leftists who are looking at this noted, they've got the CEO of the year down here. So how can you have the equal? How can you have the equality utopia when you've got a CEO and she's the CEO of the year as well? So that's one issue.
But and she's obviously a woman of color, presumably trans. It's just difficult to tell with this kind of resolution art. But this is peak neoliberal progressivism. This is what the world will look like. Everyone will be disabled, and you'll be part of the great resetted serf class that'll own nothing and be happy.
It's worse than basically everybody in this. There are no people looked long and hard for a straight white couple, for example, cannot be found. There are lesbian couples. That's a lesbian couple there. She's pregnant. There are gay couples. There are groups of there's a mixed race couple with some disabled, obviously a disabled kid, because why not?
Why did they do this?
There are 2 gay guys there.
Yeah.
But there is no representation of just a couple, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, the only intact family that I have identified in this, in the sense of a father, a mother, and a child, is the 3 next to Inclusion Square. But of course,
we can see a problem with that one, can't we?
The man is missing a leg. I mean, and also the fact that the child looks completely white.
That's an adoption for sure. I mean,
doesn't make sense.
Blonde hair. I mean,
there are some really horrible aspects of this Sargon that I'll just draw your attention to. The toxic masculinity recycling plant has got these guys here. If you can see, that they're putting into the trash. Girls are weak. Men don't cry, and men should be aggressive. Boys will be boys, and then in there they've got jokes. Can you see sexist jokes are in there? And then out comes so they feed all of this trash in there, and out comes inclusive language, respect. I mean,
Jesus.
and then
What a horrific future this is, though.
these people then collect their inclusive language, all genders are equal and all stuff. They collect them from these boxes. I think that's the idea that they. So yeah.
Look, I just can't get over how many disabled and broken people there are in their proposed utopia. Like,
Well,
why
it's just a
would you
typical
want
day
to
in
live
life.
in? Yeah, exactly. Why would you want to live in like this metropolitan like area where you own nothing, but you can just sit around doing nothing?
Now, a number of people pointed out that there was possibly a based artist trying to subvert this. This woman here is saying, "Remember the gender pay gap?" And she says, "Lol, what a joke." So some people say that. Yeah, I also picked out that there's a childcare centre here, right?
Fucking
No children.
bureaucrats.
There's no children in the
Bureaucrats
childcare
with
centre.
numbers, though. There's pie charts and numbers, and they're like talking about like the percentages of children that they have. Presumably, the pink one is the disabled children.
It's actually it's a euphemism. Child care. It's actually a bureau care center for bureaucrats with nothing to do.
Fucking awful. Awful.
And there's this horrible moment here. I felt respected and heard in that meeting today. Me too. Can you imagine that anybody in the history of the world having that conversation? I mean,
well, maybe after this has become the future.
So it really is something. And the other thing,
sorry,
yeah, carry on.
Did anyone notice that I was thinking the strategic positioning of Freedom Avenue next to the Reproductive Health Center? Do you think that's a coincidence that they want freedom around that corner?
Yes, but there's no freedom over here, of course.
No, of course.
Only down there.
I find it really interesting that that previous one you put up. I felt respected and heard. These are what you could call second order concerns, as in these are how you feel about something that has happened, right? But we don't know anything about how the thing that has happened. So the process, the sort of thing that you sincerely engage with, is actually obscured from you, which is really weird, right? Because if you want to show someone feeling like, you know, heard and involved or whatever, you'd show that person at the meeting doing whatever it is they were supposed to do, you know, that got them feeling respected and heard. But the fact that all you do is hear about it secondhand is weird. Very strange.
A lot of people pointed out down here that Equal Representation Avenue was misspelled. You see, they
re-resentation.
Yeah, representation.
So I
believe there will be equal resentment. Yeah.
Yeah. I also like the hilariously optimistic tech department. I mean, as if a society like this is ever going to actually sort of produce any sort of technology. You know, and of course across the street from that is the arts department, which everyone is, you know, they're sort of little people like sat at their sort of cubicles, like producing art under duress, I would suppose. You know, there's some taskmaster there, you know, cracking the whip, you know, telling them to produce inclusive art.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Like all of these concepts are like second order concepts, right? These are descriptions of the sincere first order things that you did. You know, this is how you would describe it, that your feelings about it post hoc. Like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Like, what are the actual actions that I'm taking? What's the fun that I'm having? You know, Inclusion Square, or, you know, this meeting or whatever. It's like Freedom Avenue. It's like, what the hell is actually going on? Education. Okay, but in what? You know, it's all of these, like, abstract concepts that apply to things in the real world, but I'm not really... Like, it feels like there's this kind of, like, it's like a mask, you know? It's like a mask over civilization.
Here are some roles for you, Carl, okay? You can be a little guy in a wheelchair on a football pitch.
Yeah.
You can be...
Actually, I can't, because there are no white people there. I'm not being represented. Oh, no, there is one. There's one in goal. Right, okay.
Okay,
so it's quite small on the screen.
I think it's a woman. I think it's a woman in goal, yeah.
I can translate.
I mean, yeah, you can't assume anyone's gender. I mean, what
That's a good point.
Monsters are you?
Yeah, so I don't feel represented here. And I mean, I feel openly marginalized by the toxic masculinity recycling plant. This seems like an anti-patriarchal future, which I firmly disapprove of.
You could be a little bald guy planting something on Climate Action Street. Look, planting
I can't. I'm not a gay leftist. I can't do it.
I like that the toxic masculinity recycling plant is spewing fumes into the atmosphere. It's just like you know. And also, did you notice next to the sort of CEO of the year thing is something? I think it says Bank of Equal.
Bank of Equal, yeah. And,
Oh my god!
which is yeah, absolutely.
So apparently, there's an economy here, although it doesn't seem like. I mean, there's like 2 shops. It's like as far as I can see.
No, but
Yeah.
I mean it. This is literally this is the perfect vision of the Great Reset. This is what they're aiming for. Where it is a capitalist, quote unquote, in form, but nobody owns anything and they're just serfs, and they're given like these lovely lives by whoever's ruling over them, the CEO of the bank or whatever.
I'm just looking what other roles Carl could legit. Okay, you could grow a
Not many.
moustache or hold hands with an Asian chap. That's an option. I can see
I mean,
that.
well, no. If I wanted to be culturally sensitive, I would, because that's what they do in places like Saudi Arabia. They
You
actually do. I'm not joking.
Oh, you can get
So I
work.
think they're more around holding hands.
You can also get work by the looks of it in a hard hat by breaking glass ceilings. You can see this guy here. She's clearly the foreman. He's been working all day breaking the glass ceiling. Look.
Oh
No,
yes,
so-
glass.
No one's building anything. Look at the back. What's that thing in the back? Workplace something that they're smashing.
Workplace discrimination. They're just smashing
God.
workplace discrimination. Yeah.
Yeah, no shit. They've put some sort of idiot in charge of the building material, and they're smashing everything down. And it's like, oh god, that's what equal workplace, anti-workplace discrimination looks like. You put someone who doesn't know what they're doing in charge, and they break stuff.
It's also
God,
quite
this is
interesting
stressing me
that apparently that there are religious people here, because I see lots of people with hijabs. I see people with turbans. I see women in a sari. So apparently there's still some sort of religious life going on here. Never mind, of course, that there are very few kind of shall we say reformed versions of those religions. So I don't know exactly how these people who are apparently conservative adherents to those religions are kind of functioning in this town. I guess the mosque isn't allowed to be in city limits or something. But I was sort of struck by the absence of religious life. But there is obviously some sort of religious life going on. Not Christian religious life, but something.
Well, remember, the people who made this don't really understand how to distinguish between cultural and religious life. So they don't really understand religion.
Oh right, they may not be. Yeah, they may be atheists and just wearing the hijab as a cultural practice. I see.
Well, no, it's not even. I mean, maybe, but whoever made that picture clearly doesn't understand like what religion's about. Like they're clearly an atheist.
I think the person that made this picture doesn't understand what humanity is about. There's a more basic misunderstanding here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, unless anyone else has got anything else to say about that, I just thought that everybody needed to know that went out, because
I will say it's a nice looking town, and I think it would be very easy to take it over. So I think that if we got our forces together, we could go and right these people and have a nice little little town for normal life.
I just want to concur with Mr. D here. That I agree. Looking at that picture was turning me into a jihadi. So,
here's a genuine question, though, right? If you did take over that,
I was being genuine.
Same.
If you did take over that town, would you rename the street? Would you rename Violence Free Alley and Equality Street and so on?
Violence Alley, Stereotype Avenue, Slavery Avenue. Yes.
Oppression Street. Yeah. Be the CEO of the patriarchy.
Hey, I sent you. I think this was done by Cringewalker. Anakin Cringewalker.
I wanted to share that too. It was Cringewalker.
I DM'd it to you on Twitter.
I will share the screen. He's just neeked it, is he? Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's the only way to be sure. Nuke it from orbit.
All right. Well, I just realised I forgot to tweet that we're live. So, oh well, I'll send that out in a second. But we are here to have a debate. We can't put it off any longer. Hold on, I'll just send this tweet out. Somebody talk a second. Hold on.
Can't put this off any longer. But hang on a second while I put this off somewhere.
I'm just here to get my push-ups in. I've already gotten 45 in while we're chatting about this. I figure if I get over 100 and another good workout in on top of that, it'll be a victory for Rome in this case for me.
I'm very worried about this because the idea that we're going to spend this entire show debating like Roman history, it just brings a chill it brings a chill of remembrance of a past co-host. And
now I should mention I did because of the topic I did invite Britisher, but he said he didn't want to come on. So there we go. I don't want to have any part of this.
What did you guys
debate.
do to Britisher, man?
Don't know. But let me just lay out the two basic propositions, okay? So for weeks and months now, my shows, whether it's this show, Cigar Stream with Charlemagne, have been barracked with super chat after super chat, claiming that the Byzantine Empire was the Roman Empire. After I flippantly mentioned one day that, yeah, I understand the basic claim that there's some continuity there, but in actuality, they were separate empires. Let's be honest. You can't just say they were the same. And, realistically, by, let's say, 700 or 700 AD, something like that, the Byzantine Empire bore no resemblance whatsoever to the Roman Empire, and for all intents and purposes, was not Roman in any single way. And on today's stream, I'm going to be proving that using fact and logic. And my opponents are going to be using emotional arguments to counter that.
Of course.
Now, just before we get going here, I'm going to share my screen. I was wondering if you would indulge me in a number of thought exercises before we get to the debate proper. Are you happy to do this?
No.
What do you mean, no? You're not happy to do my...
because your very premise itself is ridiculous, and now you want to set up some kind of sophistry in order to frame the question in a way that doesn't need to be framed. The problem is that you're trying to suggest there is some lack of continuity between the Roman Empire and the Roman Empire, and I don't know what kind of logical trickery you're trying to plan, but there simply is no question of it from a historical point of view.
Well, let me just share my screen again.
You can't explain the Eastern Roman Empire without it being a continuation of the Roman Empire.
Let me just say before you get started, AA, especially since you're trying to do this under duress, that you could make a decent case that even before the Western Roman Empire actually fell, that the Rome of that time was significantly different from the Rome of, say, 300 years before, right? I mean, the empire fragmented several times with multiple emperors. I think at one point they actually had like 4 different emperors. So, in some sense, Rome had already gone to pieces, even though it was technically still the political entity known as Rome. So I would say that would be a strong starting point for making this case, is not only detaching the Eastern Empire from Rome, but actually the entirety of the various Roman provinces from the idea of it being a single unified Rome.
Can I address that point?
Sure.
Right. I'm going to add homonym Charlemagne, who's representing himself as a German successor claimant to the Roman Empire, which is a false and unjust claim that has actually no basis in fact. So we don't need to listen to anything that he said. So that, I think, is a successful ad hominem. Sorry.
You got me.
Go on.
What
I actually wanted to say that is what it actually is like, you're looking at this through AA. You're looking at this through different time periods, right? And you're like, okay, well, the Christian Byzantine, well, I'll just call the Byzantine Empire for simplicity's sake, even though this is a false distinction that was not made until after the fall of this empire, right? But the Byzantine Empire is different to the pagan Roman Empire in the same way that modern day Britain is different to modern day England is different to feudal England, but it's still the same state.
No, rubbish argument.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's exactly the same.
I'll explain why in a moment.
Okay.
This is a good moment to remind everybody that Foundations of Logic is coming soon. Okay, and you too will understand what logical fallacies are.
I do know what logical fallacies are.
Now, currently there's a 25% off code. If you use 12 days at the moment, you'll get 25% off. So it's a pretty good one. If you're planning to get future courses, it's a good time to get them because there probably won't be a discount this big again. But also, I spotted Sargon. You said different to. Should be different from, and if you're taking Foundations of Writing, you'd know that. But anyway,
I haven't done it yet.
Let me share my screen, because before we get going, I need to share a number of things. First of all, I spotted somebody doing some last-minute prep for this. Who did I spot on this unbiased history video? Who's that?
That's someone telling the truth, AA.
The Eastern Roman Empire is the legitimate continuation of the Roman Empire. Now, you've got previous in this. You're trying to get the crowd on side before we even had the debate. You snuck in there to generate clicks. Look at that.
I'm openly ad homing my opponents, so yeah.
So that's the first thing I'll mention. The second thing I wanted to mention is I went onto Quora. Do you know that's website Quora?
Yep.
To see the sorts of low IQ arguments that people made. And if you ever go on Quora, you'll see that everybody on there's got like they put their academic credentials after their thing. So this is by Johnny Smith, MA in history and all this sort of stuff. Let's just have a look at the state of some of these arguments. And what I thought we'd do is, as a kind of scholastic exercise, I'll work through this argument. I'll break it down, and you guys can tell me either where he's gone wrong or where I've gone wrong. Okay? Does it sound good to you? And then together we can come to an understanding. So this guy on Quora has said, other answers try and justify the term Byzantine by saying that the empire changed culturally over the 1400-year history of the Imperium Romano-Roman, right? That its language changed, that its religion changed, that some cities ended up beyond the direct control of the empire at various points, that it became less multiculturalist and more nationalistic. Those are all excuses, says this low IQ writer, okay? Should we not call England by that name because it speaks a different language today than in 1000 AD, or perhaps because it was conquered by a Frenchman in 1066, or perhaps because it started to use a slightly different version of Christianity? Perhaps we should start calling Germany, France, Spain, Russia, Poland, Hungary, Austria, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Romania, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, China, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, and scores of other nations besides by a different new name. Now, I'll just pause there to break down the argument of this guy as it stands so far. His first premise, which is something you've already mentioned, Sargon, as well, is that England is still England, even though the English language has changed. Okay?
Yeah.
Fine. We can accept this premise. Premise 2, England is still England, even though it was conquered by the Normans in 1066. Okay. We all agree. So, from this, we can conclude 1, language doesn't define a nation. 2, race doesn't define a nation. Okay, we can go along with this. But what's the hidden conclusion in all of this? Why do we call England England if it's not because of the language or because of the people? Well, clearly it's because it's these islands right here, this sceptred isle. It's not because England is not 3,000 miles away, it's here, right? So the hidden premise, the hidden conclusion here is that geography defines a nation. That's why we call Germany, Germany, and France, France, and Spain, Spain, and England, England, because the land is the same. Over to you. Because my point is
okay.
that Byzantium isn't in Rome, is it? It's fucking miles away. It's in Turkey.
Yeah, but hang on. So what you have here is the featherless biped of descriptions of what a country is. Behold a plucked chicken. We are speaking to the essential thing that is England and English. In this example, in the same way in the Byzantine context, we're speaking to the thing that is essentially Rome and Roman. And so it doesn't really matter if the people change, if there is a constant. I mean, the people die, right? So they grow old and die. So the people are always changing. There is always social evolution. There are always factors that influence it. But the people themselves identify in a particular way. And there is a continuity of identity through time and through these events. And it's that continuity of identity that is the essential thing, because there is no other state or group of people or anything like that that can not only claim that historical continuity, but identify with that historical continuity. So, and it is exactly the same for the Eastern Roman Empire.
You're giving me this postmodern argument.
That's not postmodern at all. At all. No, that's first year philosophy degree.
You're saying that the way to define a nation is how people identify themselves.
That's all a nation is defined by.
Right. So if I say I'm Roman now, does it make me Roman? I identify as a Roman.
But it's not just that. There are lots of different things that weave together, strands that weave together to make a thing what it is, right? I mean, if I would say, okay, how do you know you wake up in the same room every day? You'd be like, well, it's in the same place. And it's like, yeah, but it's not in the same place. The Earth has traveled around the sun in that time. Actually, it's thousands and tens of thousands of millions of miles away or whatever. It's all about how in our heads we perceive the world and how we understand these things, not just in some abstract scientific category, but in the way we perceive it as individuals, as human beings. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a continuity of a people and a state. It's not it's not like something that's extra human. Right? You can't look at it from outside the perspective of a human being because it is a human experience.
A nation is not language. A nation is not history. A nation is not race. A nation is not a place. A nation is just what people kind of feel. Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the essential characteristic. It's the understanding of that people, of themselves, that is the essential characteristic of every nation. Otherwise, you're just sat here with the featherless biped going, well, look, I've plucked a chicken and therefore that's a man. Behold a nation, is what you're saying. So, but that's not how it works.
Because this is kind of interesting because I saw, I got a book by renowned philosopher Roger Scruton here. Mm-hmm. It's called Where We Are. Do you remember he wrote it in the aftermath of Brexit? And in that he was saying, well, conventionally people define nationhood in three different ways. He says there's the sense of belonging to a particular place, which is the one that he likes, the kind of civic nationalist one, which is we belong to this area here, this island. And that makes it Britain, and that makes it England, because it's this plot of land.
I agree.
Or you define it by... No, you don't. You do not agree, because you're saying that the geography doesn't define the nation. You have just described
the beliefs and feelings of the people.
However, what I've said, no, I didn't. I said,
what does Scruton say? Read it out again.
Right,
what was it?
So Scruton has three. He says there are three ways of defining a nation.
Yeah.
There is the kind of nationalism of place. So we belong to this island.
Okay,
and its history.
Let's stop with that phrase. We belong. Well, how is that anything other than someone's feeling?
Well, you actually
you're not owned by the island.
Well, you have to be in that place. You have to be so it's important, right? No, I'll give you an example. I watched The Hobbit yesterday, when the 13 dwarves have to return to their home, and the king of the mountain has to reclaim his throne.
Yeah.
Well, it matters that there's the mountain. It matters that it's there. They can't go to some other mountain. It has to be that mountain.
Sure.
Right. You can't just declare that. You can't say, "Oh, I'm the king of the mountain, and we're the people. We're the kings of this the lonely mountain here, but we're going to go and live in the Shire."
Yeah, but this isn't objective. This
Go
is
on.
not happening. This is not happening outside of the minds of the dwarves who believe they belong in the mountain, right? So what you're talking about is the feeling that the dwarves have for the mountain. If the dwarves all die, the mountain isn't going to be any poorer for it. You know, it's not going to care. But it's the dwarves thinking, well, we belong to a thing. And so our tradition is in the mountain. So for us to identify ourselves in the way that we think is proper, then we need to go and reconquer the mountain so we live in it, right? But if nothing is going to compel them to go to the mountain. In fact, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be difficult to achieve, is what makes the story worth telling. And it's what makes it worth hearing, because that then is the sort of like achievement of the will of the dwarves and their struggle. That's the human element that we identify with. But all of that is just them identifying as dwarves who live in mountains, in the same way that every civilization identifies itself as what it is and continues on that understanding, passing forward from what it inherits to the next generation. I too have read Scruton.
But the physical mountain's still important.
Sure.
If England was conquered,
but values are always subjective. The things that are valued in the heads of people.
If England was conquered, okay, and you were displaced and you were forced to go and live in Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
Right. Would Kentucky become England, or would you in your heart of hearts, just like the displaced dwarves, want to return to England and reclaim Swindon as your own?
I would, of course, want to reclaim Swindon as my own. But that's because of the subjective belief in the continuity of Swindon as the prime jewel of England that needs to be under the control of the English, obviously.
The objective physical location matters. That's my conclusion from what you just said.
When you say matters, it matters is a subjective value judgment. So it can only matter to an individual. And so if you say objective, what you're saying is it is somehow a part of the universe that the value must be there, right? And it's not. Values are always held only in our heads. No, an objective, neutral observer, aliens couldn't come down and identify the value of Swindon, right? I don't mean to put Swindon down when I say that, but what I mean is, to me, the displaced Englishman in Kentucky, right? They can't objectively identify that by just looking at Swindon, right? They'd have to speak to me to get my opinion on it, because this is a value I hold in my head. Because all of this, any of this stuff, it is based on places, and people and events, it's based in the real world.
England, places like the Lonely Mountain, places like Rome, we might say. Actual places like Rome.
Yes. And so when a bunch of Germans are occupying Rome, you're saying that's the Roman Empire, but it's not.
So Scruton goes on. He says, well, there have been other ways of defining a nation. You can define a nation by the blood, for example. This is the idea that race is what defines a nation. For example, the Jewish people did not have a physical country for over 1,000 years. And yet they still persisted as a people around Europe, okay, as a displaced nation. And what kept them going was the blood. Another group who had this idea of the nationality of the blood was, of course, the mid-century Germans. And Scruton says, well, we need the place. We need the nationality of place, because we don't like the blood because that's evil and Nazi and so on. But why isn't the blood the defining point of nationhood? Because again, I think of the dwarves in The Hobbit, and not only do they want to return to the mountain as a physical place, but it survives in them in the blood of the lineage of the kings. Thorin, grandson of Thor, or whatever it was. So why doesn't the blood matter?
Yeah.
Well, in the context of the Roman Empire, because who's the last descendant of Caesar who was actually an emperor? I mean, it wasn't long. Was it Nero? Was it right?
Yeah.
It wasn't long into the Roman Empire before it was non-Caesarian blood So I don't think. I mean, like if you're going to go into sort of like medieval monarchies and things like that, then yeah, that's the the bloodline was important, and that was tremendously important. But the thing is, you didn't have nationhood in that point,
Exactly.
because it wasn't really the same thing. Like France being a small region around Paris, but the Kingdom of France encompassing a large amount of the sort of area that is modern France now, even though they were all separate peoples that end up getting sort of taken over in the last few hundred years. So it's in the case of the Roman Empire, it wouldn't make sense because it wasn't based on that. It was the legitimacy of the office and the continuation of the civilization that is Rome, right? So you've got a series of like laws, traditions, institutions, religion after Constantine, and all of these things become the legitimating factor for the empire. And it's important to remember, like the empire and the emperor, like to the average person, were something that was often not really tangible, right? And so it would be just understood, but it's not necessarily that you'd interface with it in your daily life. But the point is, like, if you believe you're under this organization and the organization itself is the legitimizing factor, then if you are continuing the organization while a bunch of barbarians have taken over this other area where the organization also used to be, you will doubtless do a Justinian and say, well, we need to reconquer that area because a bunch of barbarians are currently despoiling our holy places. But you're not going to turn around and say, well, that means we're no longer the continuation of the thing that we were, and these barbarians are now that thing just because, I don't know, magic soil theory or something? Is that where we're going? Like, they've arrived in Rome, therefore they're Roman? It's.
I think you're touching on the third idea that Scruton has.
Yeah.
So he says there's three ideas. So there's the soil, there's the blood, and then the third idea is basically it's just based on an idea. And the example that most people give is that the USA and its constitution is a set of values, right? And it's those American values, whatever that means, liberal democracy.
Yeah.
This is what defines what being American is, okay?
Yeah.
And Scruton says, well, we need to reject that idea because it's silly, basically. But it seems that your view is that the Byzantines, in the same way that America is an idea, quote unquote, the Roman Empire is an idea. It doesn't belong to any particular people or to any particular place. If people feel that they're Roman in their hearts of hearts, there the Roman Empire stands, as long as they run it in a Roman way.
I think that there has to be a continuation of a tradition, because like when you're saying, oh, it's an idea, what you're doing is abstracting it from the people who would hold that idea, right? So ideas actually don't just live independently of the heads of people either. An idea written on paper where there's literally no other sentient being in the universe to read it, does it even exist? Is there such a thing if no one's there to think it? And so I really think that you need to particularize these things rather than universalize these things.
Okay, let's particularize it.
Yeah,
There is a Japanese man, okay, who has decided to move for whatever reason to Kentucky. Okay, maybe he's living on the same street.
Joining the English in exile. Yeah.
He's joining. And while he's in Kentucky, he studies at the feet of various English masters, such as yourself, in the ways of the English. Okay.
Yep.
He studies the ways of the English.
Yep.
Now, he doesn't take up all of those kind of English cultural things that you'd associate with being English, like speaking English, eating tea and scones, Henley Regatta, all those things that T.S. Eliot talks about as being very, very English, playing cricket. No, he doesn't do that. He carries on eating sushi, speaking Japanese, watching anime, whatever it is Japanese people do. Okay, but he studies, John Stuart Mill. He loves the ideas of the kind of Anglo ideas, and he's like, I'm going to carry on these traditions here in Kentucky with all of my Japanese kind of friends and family, and we are now going to be the English Empire I can claim continuity through my teachings, through my learnings under Carl of Swindon, and I'm going to carry this on now. And where we go, we're going to carry on this English way of running things. Even though I'm going to carry on speaking Japanese, even though I'm going to not adopt any English cultures at all, the fact of the matter is that we are, we're running things in a pretty English way. So we carry on calling ourselves England because we have a separation of church and state, and have vaguely classically liberal values and so on and so forth. We've got an NHS. Let's say, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good one for you.
Okay,
but
so
again, all of this is just Plato's biped, featherless biped.
So this Japanese fellow, does he get to call whatever it is he sets up in Kentucky the English Empire?
No, I think by your definition, we have to call that the Japanese Empire. Even though it's speaking English, using common law, has an NHS, and has people who call themselves English in it, we have to call that Japanese by your standard.
No, I'm asking by your standard. By your standard, by your standard, is this man's empire that he sets up in Kentucky, right? Is it now the English Empire?
But you can't call it the Japanese Empire because it's not Japanese.
Can I make an interjection? Sorry.
Go on.
What you're basically describing is the Meiji Restoration, where
what you're describing is like the Slav invasions into Greece. Like Macedonia isn't Macedonia anymore, apparently.
No.
I mean, I'm still waiting for an answer. On what basis is this? By your definition, this guy's empire should be called the English Empire, right? It should be called the English Empire. By my rational objective definitions, where you rely on culture, race, or geography to define a nation, the three laid out by Scruton and the ones used for centuries by millions and millions of people, yes, it's obviously absurd to say that this guy, whatever this guy sets up, is the English Empire. But by your definition, surely you should call it the English Empire. He's carrying on the traditions. It doesn't matter that it's in Kentucky. It doesn't matter that he's not speaking English.
I didn't say that. I didn't say any of that. Right? I said that a nation is a continuity of people, right? It's not something abstract. So it is the people involved. What you're describing is a fringe case of an Anglophile who moves to wherever he thinks the English are and adopts their practices and customs. He goes native, right? That's not unusual. That's a totally common phenomenon.
When you say continuity of people, can you define that? Can you define that? So what you mean, like their blood relatives, or like what?
Yeah. It can be in lots of different ways, can't it? But yes, it would be related groups of, areas of families, what we call, I guess you just call an ethnic group. I'm not saying like blood in the way that the Nazis are meaning blood, as in, there would be, what you're talking about is an inherited tradition that are from the people of an area and usually it's a local area because these things build up over centuries and so it requires proximity to one another. But you end up with these kind of bonds. And that becomes the civilization that you're handing down.
So the geography is important and the ethnicity is important.
Well,
I'm just trying to establish the basic premises.
Yeah, no, you're not there. You're trying. What you're trying to do is find hard borders for something that doesn't actually have hard borders, right? And that's why you keep reverting down to Plato's chicken without addressing the sort of Aristotelian essence of the thing, right? And that's the point. It is the essence of the thing that is the historical continuity that is that civilization. And so, there are definitely times where foreign elements are brought in and incorporated into the stream that is sort of like the culture of that whatever country we're talking about. That always happens. This is just what living in the real world is like. There's always this, contingent factors that affect things. But the continual interplay between the people in these societies, and you say, well, it's geographical. It's like, well, not really. Like the American colonies were no less English for being 1,000 miles away on the other side of the Atlantic, or however far away it is, right? Because there was still cultural interplay, there was still cultural contact. These people went back and forth. They read each other's writings. They'd move back and marry someone from wherever and things like this. So it's not just as simple as say, well, it's about this or it's about that, it's about the other.
But America is not England.
Hang on.
We'd agree that they're not England and they're not English now.
They absolutely are English. They speak English. They have common law systems. They were founded by English colonists. How is that not an English colony?
Well, there's only one American.
Oh, I would say you're an American colony, really, at this point.
Well, that remains to be seen. But there are worse fates, to be honest.
I don't know. Maybe we'll say.
But the point is, you can't ascribe the American colonies to any other country than England. They weren't Spanish, were they?
So let me,
well. At a point, parts of them were. What the hell is?
Oh,
I'm jamming.
D, what is this? What is this? Is this D?
Hello.
Was that you?
You have 30 seconds left.
Okay, let me just wrap up this one slide. Okay, so this guy says, but then in any case, here is the important difference: the whole of Europe wished it was Rome. Most of the world has grown up enough to recognize that bloodthirsty empires are not something to aspire to, and so no one aspires to the British Empire in the way that the whole continent aspired to the Roman Empire. Oh. So, as I say, we've got the whole of Europe wishing it was the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire is doing the damned inconsiderate thing of still existing. What to do? Why pretend that it doesn't really count? It isn't the Roman Empire. So, I just want to write out his argument in a logical way here. Premise one, everyone aspired to be Rome. I mean, I will just point out that is not true, given that the barbarian kingdoms clearly did not want to be the Roman Empire, did they? Because they destroyed it.
No. Hang on. That's just not true. The Germans spent an awful lot of time and effort during the Middle Ages trying to establish themselves as the Roman Empire. I mean, that's why they called themselves the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah, the Germans are legendary LARPers for sure.
Yeah, it's actually total cringe, and you can see why the Byzantines were wildly outraged when, like, before the Crusades, I can't remember who it was, but some German emperor wrote to them saying, "Emperor of the Greeks," and they were like, "What the fuck? We're the Romans! How dare you, sir?"
Did the Visigoths also want to be the Romans, or was it just
what time period?
This guy has said everybody wanted to be Rome. Yeah, so
what he's not saying that the barbarians who sacked Rome and destroyed the Western Empire wanted to be Rome. Obviously they wanted wealth because they were invading barbarians. But after they conquered it all, I mean, it was only within a few generations, like a few hundred years, until they started telling each other stories that actually all of these amazing buildings were built by giants. And it's like, but you guys sacked you destroyed the great empire that created these. How have you already forgotten these stories? And then I mean, like for literally centuries and centuries and centuries, the Germans did everything they could to persuade everyone that they were the real Romans.
So I'll just. Will you all agree though that this argument doesn't make sense as he's written it here? It doesn't follow. The conclusion does not follow for the premises. You'd all agree with that. It's an illogical argument. This has nothing to do with anything. He's just slipped it in, and then he's tried to draw a conclusion from it, which doesn't exist.
I have a slightly different argument from Carl. I mean, I seriously empathize the fact that Rome as an idea did exist, and it existed in the regions around Constantinople. In fact, I would say it existed until the 19th century. Mm-hmm. As part of the Ottoman Empire, it was even called the Militarum, which is, the Sultanate of Rome, or the province of Rome.
So the Ottomans were the Roman Empire too now?
No, I'm about to qualify that position.
That's
not a position. That's not a position I personally hold. What I will argue is completely incontrovertible is that from 27 BC until 1204, there was a continuously existing state which had the same institutions and a continuity that was completely unbroken. And to argue it was anything other than the Roman Empire is ridiculous. And you don't need to bring in any of the arguments pertaining to Rome as an idea. That can extend to, say, for example, Russia being the third Rome, or the Ottomans being the legitimate successors. I mean, I would hesitate to say that the Paleologus dynasty, which is the dynasty that came in after the Latin Empire took over Rome were the legitimate sole Roman Empire because of the break in continuity, but also the fact that other dynasties such as the Komnenoi and Trebizond claimed the Roman Empire, as well as the Despotate of Epirus. So what I'm arguing is that there is a specific legal continuity for the Roman Empire from 27 BC until 1204, which was completely unbroken. I mean, for example, the Senate of Rome existed all the way up until that point, and the themata, which was the ancient Roman system of administration, existed until that point. But we don't see those things reappearing under the Paleologus.
So you're arguing that nations are defined by legal continuity?
No, hang on.
I'm saying states are defined by legal continuity.
Sorry to jump in. I completely agree with what Apostolic Majesty has said there. And I think that could be described as like a thin definition of what we're talking about here, because you're talking specifically about the continuity of the state until like the 13th century or whenever it was when it's first broken and then restored. But you do also have a cultural understanding that is surrounding this. That is why you got the Despotate of Epirus and the Trebizond dynasties and all these trying to be what they perceived the order of the world to be, the order of the empire to be. And if you have that as a sort of wider or broader definition, that I don't think it's illegitimate. I think it's completely legitimate for them to think of themselves in that way. And in the time, I think they would have found it inconceivable to think of themselves in any other way.
Exactly.
So okay, I think we're drilling down now into because now you're starting to say, well, actually, when push comes to shove, the culture matters. That's what you're saying. The culture matters, aren't?
Of course it does.
Of course it matters.
The whole thing matters.
So the culture does matter. That means the language they speak does matter. And this Japanese guy I mentioned, if he really wanted to be English, he'd have to start adopting, cricket and.
I think you're missing the point. It's not that the language matters, right? It doesn't. Right. The language only matters as a continuity.
And I think you make the.
Hey, well, let's see where this goes.
No. I think the fallacious idea that Greek language is intimately associated with an idea of Greece that is distinct from Rome, and if you look at the Byzantines themselves, they. For example, Theodosius, the last emperor to rule over the United Empire, banned anything associated with Hellenistic Greek paganism, such as the Olympic Games. And there was no direct association between the pagan Hellenic culture and the Greek Roman culture that came afterwards. And so the language was associated with Eastern Rome. It was not associated with Greece, and we don't see these neo-Hellenic ideas really cropping up until the 19th century. So the language itself as an association does not link to the Greeks but to the Romans in this case. So
I just want to read this post. I now most of the posts on Quora, right, were extremely low IQ. I'll just point you to a note, right? So for example, there was this one who actually defeats his own argument before he gets to the end of his first paragraph. He says, they were Roman. At least there's a clear political and geographical continuity. Was it one of you two who wrote this? Between the classical period Roman Empire and the medieval period Byzantine Empire. That's how they thought of themselves, and to some extent, how others thought of them. For example, the Turks referred to them as Rum or Roman. Mm-hmm. Western Europeans call them Greeks for reasons of their own. What? Hold on a second. All of Western Europe was calling them Greek.
Yes,
I mean that's a bit of an admission that you come in there. Why were the Western Europeans not calling them Roman?
I explained that a minute ago. Come on, because they were pretending to centuries.
Oh, right. They were LARPing. It was them who was LARPing.
Exactly. What you've essentially done, is you have brought in to centuries and centuries of papist propaganda, the papal truth regime that has stated that the Eastern Roman Empire was illegitimate, and their candidate, Charlemagne, and all of his successors in the Holy Roman Empire were the legitimate emperors because the popes picked them.
But even worse, it's predicated essentially on the magic soil theory that I didn't think believed, but now the German refugees are the real Romans.
I just want to go through some more weak arguments.
From your perspective. from your perspective,
I wanna-
these German refugees who have arrived in Rome are the
Yeah.
real Romans.
Let's just move on, okay? I want to deal with I want to deal with these before we start the debate
right.
proper, okay? So
The debate's
here
over.
is-
Debate proper.
so here is
Wait. Did you just say before we start the debate proper?
yes, indeed. So this is just prep. This is just the necessary.
Let me just tell you, I had some very loud buzzers at the ready.
Right, this is necessary gloss. We need to define our terms before we can debate, and I'm trying to get to the semantic point that we need to get to in order to have this debate. Okay.
Mhm.
So I noticed another person, as far as I recall, says this low IQ interlocutor, the Byzantines were Roman, Greek-speaking Romans, but Romans nonetheless. By the time Constantinople was built on the foundations of the former Greek colony of Byzantium, the definition of what a Roman was has evolved. What? I mean, that's a little bit like saying, isn't it? Right? It's a little bit like saying the definition of what counts as a British person has evolved. So, really, if somebody comes over from Pakistan, opens a takeaway, and now they've got their curry house, that really is as English as fish and chips, isn't it?
Well, that's your
Because the
argument
definition
about
has
the
evolved.
Germans.
The definition has evolved, doesn't it?
Yeah, but that's your argument about the Germans arriving in Rome.
What about the French and the Revolution, AA?
Well,
This is exactly the citizenship argument, though, because I think it was in the third century that
Hold on a
citizenship was
second.
granted. So
I've just realised what you've tried to do.
By Caracalla.
You've tried to get me to accept a premise that I have not argued. Okay, I have not once argued that Charlemagne's and the Holy Roman Empire were the real Romans.
No, what we're saying is that you fell for their propaganda regardless.
No, my position is that the Roman Empire fell when Rome fell, as everybody knows.
No, it's absolute nonsense.
It
existed as a legal continuity in the East until 1204 when it was sacked. You can argue about the cultural aspect of it beyond it. Besides, Rome was not the capital of the Roman Empire since I think 286 when Diocletian instituted the Tetrarchy. My basic
position here is that yes, they may have had legal continuity, but in effect, what we had was Greeks and various other people LARPing as Romans in Constantinople.
No,
what's
miles away from Rome.
What do you define as a Roman?
Well, we can get on to that.
I think we better get on to that right now, since you've just made an affirmative statement that deserves an explanation.
Well, I'm getting on to that. I'm building up.
Okay,
I'm building up
through
the analysis of these core arguments. I'm building up to it. Okay.
All right.
So this is a high IQ post that I found by a really eminent scholar who wrote, Byzantine Empire was not Roman after a certain point, because culturally and politically they changed from even the late Roman Empire roots to something more Eastern. And I'll just skip down to this bottom box here. The Eastern Roman Empire transformed even further than in the mere matter of 100 to 200 years. Increasingly, they became Hellenized, taking on Greek culture, even a language as its formal language, meanwhile further differentiating greatly from what was left of the Western Roman Empire culture in post-Roman West due to Orthodox Christianity. By the time Theodora made everyone fell down to the ground on their faces and greet the emperor and empress in the Eastern culture style, therefore removing the last vestiges of what pluralistic class structure remained even among the top elites, the former patriarchs, the empire was already a totally different political and cultural entity, more Eastern in culture, customs, governance, and tradition than early Middle Ages West. Leave aside even late Roman Empire. And I've just written out his argument in full. Culture defines a nation, politics defines a nation. The Byzantine Empire adopted non-Roman cultures and political styles, therefore it cannot count as Roman.
Nonsense.
What have you got to say to that?
Absolute nonsense. This change, which you've been illustrating, I mean, first of all, it doesn't help that you haven't defined a date, a cutoff point between when the Roman Empire apparently collapsed. Because if you say 476, which is the traditional date. What you have mentioned here, the Easternization of the Roman Empire, happened under Diocletian, and the Christianization happened under Constantine. I mean, for goodness sake, the idea of Dominus et Deus, master and God, was created by Diocletian 200 years before you say the Roman Empire purportedly fell. And so this Easternization, and I would say, you know, creating a monarchical form of empire, existed way before there was even a West-East split in this sense. And I mean, so what? So what did they adopt Greek? You know, Greek was the majority language at the time, but there weren't all Greek subjects, for goodness sake. I mean, there were Slav subjects, Syria. Sorry, I'm Sargon.
No, it's okay. No, I completely agree with you. I think that you made your point brilliantly as well, and AA is destroyed forever on that point alone. But I think I want to go back to this, right? So this is very interesting, because this is like ISIS's interpretation of culture. Because if the Romans are not living like Romulus, then they are surely not Roman themselves, even 500 years later after the fall of the kingdom, right? They are no longer Romans anymore, because they are not. If culture defines the nation, politics define the nation, and continuity and evolution are discredited, then the Romans could stop being Roman even in Rome, because you have established in some way an a priori definition of what a Roman is, based on not the essential characteristic of a continuity of culture, but based on a series of, again, Platonic points that you will outline until Diogenes bursts in once again with a plucked chicken and says, "Behold a Roman," right? So this is the wrong way of looking at how, unless you want to commit to defining what a Roman is, but then that Roman may never exist, and your perfect form of a Roman will forever be mythical.
What I would suggest is that there are a set of trumps, okay? So I would say that the geography and the ethnicity arguments possibly trump these two, right? So you can change the nature of what Roman means by changing the nature of Rome itself, okay? Just in the same way that William the Conqueror changed the face of England by building castles and introducing
I have a controversial point to make, actually.
Norman cultural.
I would say Rome has a better continuity than the England of 927 to 1066 to the England after 1066, because unlike Rome, which had an unbroken legal continuity in institutions, what William the Conqueror essentially did was import French institutions, and whilst, obviously synthesizing elements of English common law, it was a radically different institution from that which preceded it.
Indeed, and what I'm saying is that this is why there's a hierarchy. Okay, there's a in how you're going to define a nation. I would say, well, the culture and the politics are important, as this guy says, but trumping both of those are probably the bloodlines, the ethnicity, and then the geography. So the actual physical location of who lives in the place. Okay, so yes, William the Conqueror came, he built castles, he brought new political institutions, he changed, but nobody would say that England before and England after were not still England, right? We'd agree that England was the same, and
but
so but the reason that we can argue that, the reason that we can say there's continuity in England, is because it's the same land.
If it wasn't the same about, sorry, so Carl, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, this is not true again, because it comes from the fact that the thing is identified by the people in it. And again, it's not culture and politics or even location that defines the nation. It is the understanding of the people of themselves. Like when the Persians invaded Greece, right, and they marched their way down to Athens, all of the Athenians left Athens and fled to Salamis. Are they no longer Athenians because they don't live in Athens anymore? They are still the Athenians, right? But hang on. So, but what you're saying is, no, magic soil theory. Now these are Salaminians, right?
I'm saying you didn't hear what I'm saying. I said there's a hierarchy. So I said the geography
but
is
there
really
isn't a hierarchy.
The geography is important, but the ethnicity is important too.
Yes, and I'm saying that the Eastern Roman Empire had these two things. I mean, it would be different, say, for example, if Constantinople... Listen. If Constantinople was some, distinct foreign entity that, Romans fled to, that'd be one thing. But it was founded by Romans, and it was created by a Roman emperor, for goodness sake. Moreover,
in the Roman Empire.
In the Roman Empire. And moreover, you can argue that Constantinople actually became more Roman because it was the center of the Christian Revolution.
And not only that, Rome had owned that area for longer than the United States has been in existence.
Yes, 300 years.
After that, if at that point that territory doesn't count as being Roman, again, no one living at the time would share that understanding.
Let's carry on. So this is the one of the highest IQ posts I found on Quora. He said, "If," right, and this was very good because this is conditional logic that he's using. He says, "If we can agree that a Roman, quote unquote, ceased to become simply a descriptor of the city of Rome or even the Republic by 27 BC, right? And we can agree that it came to include any living person within the Roman Empire before 476 that was bestowed citizenship, that is most of them. So regardless of their ethnicity, if you were a random Slav, right, and you could still be a Roman citizen, right? You didn't have to be actually Roman. You could be a Slav living in the Roman Empire and you'd still be a citizen of the Roman Empire, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And that after 476, those people who were not Roman citizens, the empire had collapsed but remained Roman by the way things were done, and that quote unquote Roman is akin to the 20th century qualifier Western, the West, the developed liberal democratic capitalist North, then and only then am I comfortable calling Byzantine the Eastern Roman Empire."
Okay, can I make a
go on.
Can I make a contention with the fourth point? I don't. First of all, the West, developed liberal. I think that's too general a point to be made to Rome. I mean, the example we have in the Roman case is actually two very distinct examples, and that's because the fundamental legacy between East and West is the cultural divide, which is that in the East we have orthodoxy and we have a Greek-led culture. In the West we have essentially a Catholic-led culture. So we have two very different conceptions of what Rome are as a result of those two legacies. For example, the Russian conception of what Roman is very different from the Austrian conception of what Roman is, but both claim in some aspects to be derived from the same tradition of Rome. So I don't think that's a particularly helpful definition.
I agree. This is very broad. I wouldn't even say Western. That seems to be a layer.
I'm showing you this.
Hang on. So it would be more accurate to say. Again, the West is a very broad thing, but speaking specifically, if I was to call America English, that's true, right? In the same way that this person is talking about the qualifier of Rome and Roman. If you inherit Roman law, if you inherit Roman institutions, if you inherit a political continuity with Rome, and remember the Romans colonized everywhere as well. Roman colonies were literally everywhere. So Roman citizens from the city of Rome moved across the empire and settled there. So, this is what Romania is. You get this all the time. So you can't just draw these distinct ethnic changes. By your definition, France is probably one of the most Roman places on earth, right? Because after Julius Caesar destroyed 2/3 of the population, it got repopulated with Italians who were just at that point just considered to be Romans outside of Italy, by the people outside of Italy. They were just all called Romans. So there's no distinctions, no hard distinctions that you're looking for.
Isn't it just easy to say France is defined by the area that has been called France by a very long time and by the French people as derived from the Franks, Charlemagne? Isn't that an easier argument? And then we don't run into any of these problems.
Well, no, because the Franks were themselves German who sympathized with the Romano-Gaelic tribes that came.
But what I'm saying is that they started there. That's the start of France, and before that, who cares what was going on?
The second Roman Empire, the Roman Empire of Constantine, started in Constantinople.
Yes.
Anyway, he goes on. This guy, he says, because calling themselves Romani is the same as chatting to a Japanese citizen in the ideological 50s to 90s who would admit to a different language, culture, sphere of influence, but a common, quote, Western set of values, outlook, and method of ordering society.
This is
So
definitely an aspect of reality, though. I mean, look at Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong is in a very similar position where, like, racially, they're Chinese, but culturally, they're very westernized, right? They're very Britishized. And they like that. They hold to that. That's how they think of themselves. They don't think of themselves as part of the Communist Chinese Party. And clearly, given the scale of the protests, you know, this is not something they're comfortable with. And they would rather be in our
None of those Hong
civilization.
Kong people, though, would say, "Oh, actually, Hong Kong is really where Britain is. Hong Kong is England."
Well, if
your
England, okay, but if England was conquered by a giant invading Islamic army, and the British government fled in exile to Hong Kong, and that remained like a Constantinople, would we not consider that to be a continuation of British civilization?
I think a lot
Or
of
would the caliphate that now occupies England be British civilization? Because it's in England.
I think a lot of our friends would become like the dwarves from The Hobbit and want to reclaim England.
Absolutely.
But that's what they wanted to do in the Roman Empire as well, AA, and they successfully did it. I mean, remember, the Eastern Roman Empire, I mean, I'm just going to call it the Roman Empire, for God's sake. I mean, after 476, there is no West-East distinction anyway. There is just the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
The Roman Empire controlled Rome until the 8th century. I mean, one of the precipitating factors as to how Charlemagne got the imperial title was because the Eastern Romans couldn't control the Pope. So if your association is with the city of Rome, then we're talking centuries after supposedly the Western Roman Empire collapsed.
This was what Justinian did.
I'm not happy with this.
They even controlled parts of Italy.
I'm not happy with this
until the Normans conquered southern Italy.
Wait a second. Let's stick with this Hong Kong example. I've been to Hong Kong, okay, and there's a lovely hotel there called the Peninsula Hotel, where you can go and you can have some tea and some scones. I'll never forget it. I went there and I saw a Japanese couple trying to put the cream and the jam on top of the scone, and I went over and I said, "Listen, you have to cut it and put it in the middle," because it was. But right, would you not agree that a Hong Konger going to the peninsula and essentially pretending to be English and saying, "Oh well, we're living by Anglo common law. We have very English ways, and I'm here having my scone." Would you not just say that they are LARPing? They're not actually English. They're just a Chinese person LARPing.
How are they LARPing if they've never known anything else?
It's a LARP.
How?
Because have you been to Hong Kong? It's nothing like England. It's nothing like England, though. They speak Chinese for one.
Yeah, but Canada's nothing like England. Like by these degrees, like they speak French.
And a Canadian person saying they're English would also be LARPing, wouldn't they?
Well, no, I don't think so, because they've never been anything else, right? Like they've
I'm not sure about this,
their ancestors got on a boat, traveled.
This is a bit like saying, I'm an Italian American. I am Italian. Look, you see, I eat pizza and I do pasta, and I can name Sicily on a map or something.
Hey,
they're not really Italian.
Come on. In here.
Sure.
You want me to switch sides here?
I'm not saying that they are genetically English, but what I'm saying is you can't point to their civilization and say that it came from somewhere else. Right? It was that their civilization is a product of England.
Exactly, with the Greeks in particular.
That's a different claim. What I'm saying is, right, so let's just take the...
things that are not products of England, English.
Americans are big on this, okay? Americans love saying things like, "Oh, I'm an Irish American, top of the morning to you." I mean, they're not Irish. They're American. They're just not. I mean, whatever you say, whatever you do, doesn't make them any more Irish.
I've never heard of a comparison.
Take one of them to Dublin and see what happens.
Yeah, with anyone identifying as, I'm a Bulgarian Roman, or I'm a Serbian Roman, or I'm a Turkic Roman, for goodness sake. I mean, the ethnic identity which you're espousing, I mean, is far more, again, a 18th and 19th century invention, derived from the legacy of the French Revolution. And that association just didn't exist. I mean, another brilliant example, which Carl will be able to talk about at further length than me, is, what was the Empire of Alexander, for goodness sake? If it, wasn't, again, what was it? How could you possibly define it with your I hate to say this, but blood and soil approach to nationality.
Yeah, Cleopatra was the last Egyptian pharaoh and the first one of the Macedonian dynasty that spoke Egyptian. So for 300 years, something like that, the Greeks had ruled over Egypt, and by your definition, they would have to be Egyptians.
Also, a interesting point. Do you know where the last Greek-speaking state in the world existed before Heraclius turned the official language of Rome into Greek? Where do you think it was?
No
where do you
idea.
think it was?
No
India.
idea.
India.
Right.
That's
But
not
you'd
right.
never
This is
say
going
that
to be
India
Bactria
was,
or somewhere like that,
nev-
isn't it?
Yeah.
you'd never say that
Yeah.
India was Greece.
No, I'm saying there was a Greek identity, a Greek colony in India,
A continuity.
a continuity which existed
Like
again.
a Greek kingdom that was manned by Greeks who thought of themselves as Greeks because they travelled from Greece.
Yes,
And
with
brought
links
Greek
back to
traditions.
Alexander.
It seems to me that no matter what you guys do, you either pivot to blood or you pivot to soil. You just can't see it.
Well,
What's the continuity coming from if it's not the blood?
We've already
the people,
explained.
the people. It is
People, the
the
culture, the
people
law,
and the
the
tradition and this is why
What does the people mean? What does the people mean?
the
If it's not the
people
blood,
means,
what is the people?
it's the traditions, it's the things they do, right? One of the things that was so bad about the transatlantic slave trade is that it actually destroyed the tribal lineage of the people going, right? And so now they're just left with black. And black isn't really a very nice thing to be called, especially if black just means slave, right? And now, like, black people in America have inherited an identity that is entirely negative and have had to try and make something out of that, which is really rough because really what we like, if you went to some Arab slave trader and you were just called white, you'd be like, no, I'm English or I'm Welsh or whatever it is you'd identify, right? You wouldn't want to just be the slave, which would be white. You would say, no, I'm something, because that's a positive identity. That has a set of values. You have a distinct map of people in mind, like your neighbors, your friends, your family. These things have goodness and value to them. They're not just slaves, right? And that was severed with the transatlantic slave trade. So the people lose their tribal identities, just get compressed into slave. And that's why I think that the black community in America has the kind of pathologies that it has.
So back to my hierarchy then. We're back to, well, the culture matters. It's the culture.
No, but it's not just the culture, it's the continuity of the people. These can incorporate other groups of people, and it can lose chunks of its own groups, like the Greeks in Bactria, right? But the continuity, the understanding of the people, of their own history, their traditions, and themselves, and the way they identify and their institutions, this continuity is like a river, and many, many different things that flow together make the whole. And you're just trying to pull one of these things out and say, right, is it this? Is it that? Is it the other? Is it no?
So can you buy into it? Can you buy into it? Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's say
taking
this.
one person from a foreign culture and having that person set themselves up as a representative, obviously doesn't work because you're not part of the continuity.
But
You're
can
just a
become
LARPer.
part-
you're a fan, right?
You can become part of it. Like
You
Disraeli,
can become part of the
Disraeli, for
continuity.
example, was obviously, if you trace his lineage, he was Jewish, but he became the British Prime Minister and is now part of the history of this country. So,
Yeah.
and famous. Did he convert? I think Disraeli may have convert.
Yeah,
So
I think he did, yeah.
Disraeli he opts in. You can opt in to the culture and therefore become quote unquote Roman. Is this?
Yeah, well,
what
have
you're
you never tried, have you never gone abroad and tried speaking to them in their own language?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Generally, people really like it. People want to, people.
Yeah, but I don't
appreciate it.
become just by speaking their language. I just don't become one of them.
Yeah, but if you were to live in France and then want to be like the French around you, then, I mean, is that not something?
I mean,
Is
I
that
could live in
nothing?
France my whole life
You know,
and not
would
become
someone
French.
would someone say you're the wrong blood?
Well,
you know?
I would say I could live in France my whole life and never become French, even if I
example I'm giving.
wore a stripe, even if I put garlic around my neck and danced around with onions and a baguette.
Yeah.
I would never become French. there's a chance, right? If we moved when AAA was young enough, that she could become French, right?
Sure, but that's just habituation, isn't it?
But that is the only. So the first generation never can. I mean, only through time.
We're not talking about immigration. We're not talking about the first generation. I mean, the example you just used, for example. Sorry, Mr. D.
No, go ahead. I'll wait.
Well, essentially, what you're saying, AA, is people would have that sort of, again, that first immigrant sensibility after having existed for 300 years under the yoke of France, which is essentially, again, what the Greeks were doing when the Byzantine Empire ostensibly was created, but in reality, it was just the continuation of the Roman Empire. There was no memory of an independent Greek state in Greece that was anti-Roman, for almost a dozen generations at that point, if not more.
And certainly no political continuity.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's time to move on to the final phase of my setup here, which is a series of historical moments I've picked out that I found.
Yes.
So this is Justin. He says, "Hey, my name is Justin. I'm like so Roman. Dude, you don't speak Greek and you live in Constantinople."
He did speak Latin.
So
well, no, he doesn't speak Greek. Yes, exactly.
This is Justinian the second with his metal nose, right? On what basis is this man Greek? He was the emperor. So on what basis is he Roman? I mean, look at him.
Well, the fact that he. What do you think Romans look like?
He's wearing a red toga, which indicates again supreme authority.
I guess the problem is he's got a beard, which
Marcus Aurelius, of course, had.
Well, this does bring up a question.
Was he really Roman if he had a beard?
Oh, he was also a Stoic.
We keep talking about We keep talking about continuity of culture, but I'm curious because there is a very distinct and marked difference between certainly the artistic culture of the Byzantines and what we were calling Rome proper, the Western Empire. I mean, there were certain cultural carryovers, but the art is fundamentally different between what came after the kind of fall of Rome and the transfer to the Byzantines and what came before. And so I do think it's not so clear that again, what are we defining as culture? Are we defining language? Are we defining?
Okay, hang on. I've got you there. I've got this right. So, what you've done there is defined what you're viewing as the sort of classical Romans, the pagan Romans. They're not Roman. They're Greek. By your standards, they are as Greek as they come because they have Greek statues, they have Greek literature, they have utmost admiration for Greek power and achievement. And then they transported this culture back to Greece after conquering it. And the culture that you're seeing here is Christian innovation. So after the Roman Empire was Christianized by a Roman emperor, this was the kind of artistic culture that came out of it. Very stylized, and as you can see from like the halo behind this guy's back, deliberate rejection of the paganistic, naturalistic sort of forms, and a deliberate embrace of the more spiritual, idealized view of Christianity. Exactly. Again, a very, very Greek-influenced thing, in fact. So it's Greeks all the way down, I think.
And there isn't.
Well, I would agree. I think fundamentally, I mean, I feel like certainly in terms of the art, the Romans always, at least what we think of as sort of high Roman art, was, as you said, Carl, it was an imitation Greek culture. In fact, they weren't terribly good at it. I mean, they'd never really figured out how to sort of do marble statuary without resorting to certain kind of plinths and things to prop it up. They never really figured that out. And also a lot of those things were kind of imitations in marble of originals which were bronzes anyway. But it is curious to me that there does seem to be a whole kind of current that came into the Christian art of the Byzantines that was from a slightly different provenance. And I don't know enough about
Eastern
that.
influence.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, I am sort of interested in sort of where that came from, but there does seem to be a kind of break there that is religious in nature as well as artistic.
Notice that it's only with the adoption of Christianity that Rome goes into these weird thought policing sort of civil wars and like ecclesiastical schisms. Like before, when it was pagan, it was all very syncretic, and the sort of obsession with orthodoxy very much comes from Eastern religious thought, it seems to me, and this is not something that is common to Western religious thought.
It seems quite un-Roman, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not just un-Roman; it's un-pagan.
So let's carry on. Leo, they call you the wise. Yes. Can you point to Rome on a map? Rome is not a place; it's a state of mind. Where I walk is Rome. This is basically like. I don't really understand the arguments that you guys have.
Hang on. Let's go back to that one. Let's go back to that. Rome is a place and it's miles away.
Yes.
Right. So as soon as an Englishman gets on his boat, goes around, conquers someone, in Africa, suddenly he's no longer an Englishman. He'd be like, "Where's England? It's miles away, isn't it? You're not really an Englishman. You're in Africa. You're an African."
Well, that doesn't work, because in this case, it would have to be the African himself saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm still English," not the English guy, but like 200 years later, the African, the chap in Botswana, "Oh, I'm English, by the way." That's the argument you're making.
Which Leo? Which one is
this? Is Leo the Wise?
This is Leo the Sixth. Just help me if I am, because again,
Well,
there's Leo the Great, who's a pope.
I think the difference here is talking about whether or not a place is England or whether or not there's an Englishman in a place. So in that example, the Englishman doesn't cease to be English, but the place might not necessarily be England.
For AA, right? So the people who emigrated from England to India and grew up, had children who grew up in the Raj, those children weren't English.
The children were English, but the India never became England.
But
this is the point.
The Raj was an English organization, right?
It was an English organization, but nobody living in the Raj, right, would have said, "Oh, we're in England, by the way." Because they weren't.
This all the time.
England was a specific place miles away.
Yeah, but no, it's not. They like, I mean, look at the sort of World War I poetry. They're like, "Oh, wherever I'm buried, there will be a piece of England there," right? It's not just a landmass, and it's
really important. So, like in the Shakespeare plays, right? Whenever the kings come back, let's say Richard II has been abroad to Ireland or something, or whoever the king happens to be, whenever they come back, they touch the soil. It's really important. The soil is important. There's no right. So the fact of the matter is, you can take the Englishman out of England, but it doesn't stop the fact that England is England. It doesn't make India England.
England is only England because of the continuity that it has. Again, if England was conquered by a bunch of jihadis, then they don't consider it to be the same civilization. And if you got back there, you kiss the floor and then you look up and it's, mosques everywhere, you'd be like, "Okay, this isn't exactly how I remember it. I don't, but by your definition, you could be like, well, this is England."
Right, and what I'm saying is, right, you let's take a Roman from like peak Roman Empire, drop him in Constantinople in, let's say, 1200, okay, or 1150 if you want. He wouldn't recognize anything. Would he be like, "Oh, we're in Rome"? No, he wouldn't.
In the same way that if you drop a Londoner from 1,000 and drop him now, you won't recognize anything. In fact, the difference would be more.
It's the Gherkin man. Come on, it's just traditional London.
He would. Somebody would explain to him. He'd say, "There's the Thames. I recognize the Thames. I know London. It's changed a lot." Right, but you drop the Roman in Constantinople, and you drop the Roman in Constantinople, and he wouldn't say, "Oh, there's the Thames." He'd say, "Oh, this is actually a different city as well, because I don't have the soil and I don't have the blood." They're different
But hang-
people, and there's a different place. So it's
Again,
a fucking different place.
No. The Romans colonized the Roman Empire. Right? Do I?
How
will keep
much did Romans?
repeating this?
How much
right?
did Romans and Italians actually settle the places that were
Massively.
Especially when it comes
2/3
to
of the
Constantinople.
population of Gaul was eradicated or enslaved. There was 1/3 of the people left after Caesar had dealt with it, and the Romans repopulated. It was like a new frontier. It was like the American West, actually, right? So the Romans went everywhere. And what's Mithridates engaged in a wholesale slaughter of Romans in the east, something like 50 years after Pompey had conquered it, and he killed like 200,000 Romans. Like, so in like, the span of just 2 generations, 200,000 Roman citizens had, from, Italy had moved to Anatolia and started setting up over there, right? Roman colonization of their empire was just something completely normal. And the reason you don't think about it is because it was just not worth mentioning. It just happened all the time, right? And so you can't draw these firm distinctions of blood, because that's just not how the thing worked. And then, okay, yeah, if you take someone from one city and dump him in another city, yes, he's not going to recognize that city. But if you took a Roman citizen who was born in the Roman Empire, say in Rome itself, and was part of Constantine's army and then marched all the way over to Byzantium and started putting down the foundations of the new city of Constantinople. And so he sits there, builds he personally is building the emperor's palace. And then 1,000 years later, dump him back in Constantinople. He'll know where the emperor's palace is.
So I'm gonna move on. Behold,
I love
Right.
because we're
Behold.
BTFOing your points.
behold, it is I.
I'm just gonna
Basil.
move on. Yeah, I
Just
thought
moving on.
Oh, I
Well,
mean,
it's still setting up, right? We haven't
People-
gotten there.
Yes, we haven't begun the debate
you
yet.
could-
God.
the arguments are laid out. People can make up their own mind. Behold, it is I, Basil. Doesn't sound very Roman. And then, so people are saying, "Don't let him hear you." And for my next decree, every Roman citizen will be entitled to a portion of hummus and flatbreads. Again, not very Roman. If I say hummus and flatbreads are Roman, they are Roman. You understand the point I'm trying to make here? Like, what? By this point, when you've got this chap Basil, what aspect of the culture or the people or anything is Roman by this point? They're literally a different culture, a different
The
people.
office of the emperor, for one.
All right, so we're back
The
to
martial
regional.
nature of the Roman emperor, yes. The Christianity, which could be associated again with Constantine.
But interestingly, Basil, we're talking about Basil the Bulgar Slayer here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, his mother was Greek. But his father was, as far as I can tell, I'm just going through his Wikipedia genealogy, but he seems to have been a Roman.
Let's carry on. And so,
I would say
This guy-
we are getting into the territory of kind of
Blood
rehashing
and
things that
soil.
have already been said. So I think we should think about kind of wrapping up and making final
yes, we will.
statements
We'll hit the super chats after this. So
and adjudicating
This is
the winner of this debate.
Right.
I've been
This
keeping
is
track of all this, by the way.
Yeah. This is this guy's name, right? Which I can't even.
Komnenos, yeah.
Rendered in
Yeah.
Greek, yeah.
He says, "Do we still have to pretend we're Roman? They aren't even trying anymore." Yeah, but he's going to kill us if we point out that we haven't been in Rome for centuries, but don't speak Latin or carry those little swords. Go for it, I reckon. I mean, look at this guy. This
Well-
guy is not Roman.
Are we even Anglo-Saxons if we don't live in Saxony?
I mean,
Don't even carry those little Saxes anymore. That's what
No.
we were named after. Oh, God, we're not even English now.
Mehmed II. Come, Constantine, pig. I come to sack your city and close your gates. Constantine. Welcome to Rome. It's me, Biggest Dickus. I mean, look at by this point, right?
I will not
By
have
1453.
I
by
will not have the
1453,
memory
Right.
of the marble emperor defamed here. I'm sorry, he was a complete and utter Chad. He would not surrender the city.
Yeah.
When the siege essentially had been won by Mehmed, he declared, "Oh my goodness, the city has fallen and I am still alive." And he went out like a Chad and died with his troops defending the last vestige of the Roman Empire.
True.
Right. Before I hit the super chats, how are we going to decide D, how are we going to decide who won this debate?
The person who kept saying, right, I don't have an answer, let's move on, is the person who lost.
No, I get to decide who won the debate. So
okay.
yeah, so finish up.
All right. Well, so if you want to make some closing mentions, closing arguments, I'll leave it to you guys first, and then I'll hit you with my own coup de grace.
Okay, there's simply no way of describing the Eastern Roman Empire as not the Roman Empire. Like, to describe it is to describe what the Roman Empire was and became.
Can I add my closing argument?
Yes.
I would like you all to expunge the idea of Byzantium from your heads. It was an invention by a German historian 100 years after 1453. I think his name was Hieronymus Wolff. And the idea of Byzantium, again, is this association with the Eastern Empire, something strange, something exotic, and ultimately Byzantium was a pagan colony. So something very removed and, again, strange compared to the Latins in the West. And ultimately, I think this is due to, again, the papal truth regime and Western propaganda to defame the idea of the Eastern Roman Empire. So I would go farther and say, don't use the epithet of Byzantine ever again.
So my closing argument is this. Charlemagne, do you want one, by the way, or do you not bother?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I came into this. Well, I mean, you basically invited me like 2 minutes after the stream was supposed to start, right? So, don't exactly have any knowledge prepared, but I actually found it pretty interesting. I kind of expected the Byzantine side to basically to win the debate, but I kind of thought the whole idea was silly. But after listening to the arguments, I think there actually is something to this idea of Byzantine actually being or Byzantium being Roman. So perhaps something I can research in my spare time. And I think we actually, if you sort of read between the lines of this goofy stream, we actually got into some interesting ideas about what a people actually is, and how difficult it is to actually define it. It's not merely nation, politics, geography, genetics. It's this combination, and it's actually really difficult to disentangle these things. So it was an interesting stream, I think.
So I will make my closing argument. The reason that these guys lost, no matter what chat says, no matter what Charlemagne says.
Well, no, I agree they lost because
What?
I succeeded in doing lots of push-ups, and
Right.
I thought about my Roman ancestors while doing it.
The reason that they lost is,
I just mean intellectually, it was a good case.
you can define a nation by place, you can define it by blood, you can define it by culture or ideology. The Byzantine Empire was not people by people with Roman blood. So that
Wrong.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it
Two,
was.
it physically was not in Rome. So
It
you
was part
cannot
of the Roman
define it by
Empire.
geography. And three,
Yes, you can.
it didn't have the same culture or ideology. So
Yes,
on
it did.
all three, they lost. On all three, they lost.
It's like
Actually,
you're
I think you're-
impervious.
Hey,
single point.
Byzantines, don't interrupt. He's making his closing arguments.
Don't misgender us.
Right. No,
We're the Romans, thank you very much.
All right,
Okay.
Roman.
Don't you Menshevik us, motherfuckers.
right. Come on. Go on, D. Make your verdict.
My verdict is that everyone lost. Because we wasted almost 2 hours with this irritating and intractable topic. The thing is, I think that it does show that there's a philosophical difference, and I don't even think we've never really even agreed on the terms of what would constitute a winning position in this debate. So I just think it's a matter of your philosophical understanding, as Charlemagne sort of said, of what constitutes a people and a culture and a continuation of civilization. So I don't think that either side persuaded the other side of anything at all. So I think it really just depends. And in the end, it doesn't really matter. I mean, does it matter to the study of the history what this sort of very narrow idea of defining something as a continuation or defining Byzantine again, which is as was said is a sort of a concept dreamed up by a German. So what does it matter? It was a very interesting discussion, and I think that was the good part. But in the end, I don't think there's a winner. I think everyone, has a sort of philosophical position. And
Sorry, hang on. I have to object, right? Because I can't help but notice that the people who skimmed Wikipedia articles are on one side, and the people who have read books on this are on the other side. And these are being treated as if the ignorance of the Wikipedia article readers is as valid as the knowledge of the book readers. And it's rather frustrating because simply denying the points is not a refutation.
Breaking Associated Press has called the debate for academic agent.
That means we
No. Now, before
Fair enough. Can't argue with that.
Before I get onto the super chats, okay, I want to say this, and I'll say it once and for all. Super chat. We've done this debate now. We spent 2 hours on it. I gave it my best shot. Okay, even if people think I lost or whatever, it will never be discussed again. If you send me super chats in any subsequent show after this one, I will ignore them. I'll still take the money, but I just won't read them out. Okay? Is everybody happy? Is everybody happy?
I'll be honest with one final request, please. I DM'd you a picture. Could you bring that up on the screen, please?
Yeah. Okay. Go on.
And I will say that the Chad is right. I decided to take up the mantle of the Britisher and sit firmly on the fence. Or the Roman wall, as the case may be.
Okay. Let me just share this picture. Can you see that?
Yep. So I would just like to say, behold a Roman. That is, academic agent cannot refute that Brennus, the Gaul, sacking Rome, is not a Roman.
Well, I can. No, based on the fact that I defined it by blood, soil, and culture. Those are three different criteria, and you need all three. But anyway,
what was the blood of the Romans?
Being Roman.
No.
All right.
That's not true, though. Unironically, Rome was not an ethnic group.
Let me have a look then at the. Yeah, they are an ethnic group, like Beppe Signori, that striker from the mid-90s. He was Roman, kind of blonde, and
I'm just taking this as an admission of defeat.
So let's have a look at these super chats. Then we're going to have to hit them quickly because there's quite a few. And I'll mention once again, there's currently a sale on the academic agency. The code is 12 days. You get 25% off. So Coney says, I'm proud to have been responsible for starting this whole Byzantine argument in the first place. Eastern Roman gang, rise up. I wouldn't be that proud, Coney.
Why are you
shouldn't be proud. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah.
Coney says, at the moment, I'm playing Crusader Kings 3 as the Eastern Roman Empire. Yeah, that's a point. In Crusader Kings, do they call it Eastern Roman or do they call it Byzantium? I can't remember.
I don't play.
Mickey the Fourth says, Rome was a system of law governing noble families that ruled the plebs. It was not an ethnocentric, nor was it determined geographically. Rome was the law. Also, Rome is just an idea. It's just an idea, basically.
Well, I have actually explained to you that there is a continuity in law, not just an idea of Rome.
Yeah, I'm not sure of this idea of legal continuity, because by that basis, you could maintain the legal structures of England, transport them to Botswana, have it peopled entirely by Botswana, and still call it England. I'm not having that. It doesn't sound right. Hagnar the Viking says, unbiased history of Rome sees Eastern Roman Empire as proper, and seeing how this is the internet, and no one ever lies on it, checkmate Jamelia Simp. Hagnar the Viking also says Britisher is better than D, seeing the fact that he would never be late on such a stream as this. Furthermore, Germania delenda est. Actually, the Britisher was late all the time, more late than D often. Explosive says the Byzantines were Greek with Roman laws. Make Anatolia Greek again. Owain says, remember who were the last true Romans, the true last Romans, the Romano-Britons, aka the Welsh. Kingdom of Gwynedd is the last true kingdom. Rhinothia de Gwynd. Did anybody want to comment?
On this is actually pretty funny. There's a mod for you can mod Rome Total War to allow the like British Roman rebel faction to be playable and conquer the entirety of Europe as the British Roman rebels, which is pretty funny. Just reminded me of that. It's something I want to do one day on like hard mode or something.
DRC is King says Ave Caesar. The Middle Ages lasted from the fall of Rome to the fall of Rome. Roman emperors came from Spain, Carthage, Greece, Macedon, and Armenia. Al Shayatori says, I am 100% convinced that AA is a German spy. AA is trying to propagate the ultimate historical grift developed by the Holy Roman Empire to devalue the Eastern Roman identity, not to mention your latest take on Brexit. What's my latest take on Brexit? Was it not a betrayal? I thought it was a betrayal. But there we go. Ludwig von Lammy says AA is the Michael Barrymore of right-wing YouTube.
I'm not swimming at your place, AA.
He has broad appeal due to him covering politics, economics, philosophy, religion, history, as well as culture, and the GILFs love him too. Who are the GILFs? GILFs? Grandmothers?
Oh, you mean
What's
GILFs?
a GILF?
Do you mean GILFs?
GILFS. Yeah, what's a GILF? Don't know. Oh, yes. He is talking about the grannies. The grannies did love Michael Barrymore. That is true. Grammaton 3000 says Byzantine was the only true Rome. I mean, that's not true, is it? Because one, Rome wasn't in the Byzantine Empire, was it? Ace Ventura says having the ones.
It's like the last 3 hours just didn't happen, isn't it?
Well, because
I was reading when I read Mein Kampf, right? There was this part in it that I thought was really amusing. That Hitler was complaining that he'd be arguing with Marxists, and he'd go through the entire day arguing with a Marxist and get them to understand his points and accept how they were wrong. And then the very next day, it was just boom, reset. It was as if the conversation had not happened. And I totally understand what he's talking about now.
Ace Ventura says having one CEO be the CEO of the year is like a father buying himself a best dad of the year mug. Indeed.
I'm the best dad.
Jedi Knight Anaquin Cringewalker says the Harris re-education camps have a terribly high injury rate and a peculiar injury for white men in particular. Yep. Although I will say that there was many different races of disabled people in that graphic, to be fair to them.
That's a lot of brutality that the UN Women's planning to mete out, isn't it?
They don't discriminate in whose legs they break. Winter Phoenix Forest Kirin says, Sargon keeps dodging my attempt to send him an important documentary called Cannibal Gingerbread House. I hope to manage to catch him on a Lotus stream. 2 videos to induce holiday spirit. So there you go.
I don't even know what that is, but it sounds awesome.
President-elect Joe Biden says the AP has declared that Rome has not fallen. Yeah, indeed. I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. Joss the Great and Powerful says, as the man who got his bout signed and set up, I expect a cut of the super chats. You're all welcome. Listen, there are things that are more important than the material. Jaws the Great and Powerful, and those super chats
are just an idea, are they?
Right, those super chats are my compensation for the pain I've had to endure for discussing this interminable topic.
Was there anything about it that you enjoyed?
Magnus says the Rus are the true inheritor of the Eastern Orthodox Empire, and thereby Putin is the true Roman Emperor. I mean, Is that true?
No. Not really.
But
Mickey the
it's
Fourth
funny.
said-
Let's meme it.
Yeah.
AA's
How
flawed
they
argument considers Rome a nation, which it never was. It was always an empire. Come on, man. AA, you can do better. I
Maybe
said
in
nations
economics
are
you can do
defined
better.
by. I said nations are defined by three things: the culture, the which includes history and things like that, eating scones and playing cricket and so on, is defined by the actual ethnicity of the people, and it's defined by the place itself. All three are lacking in their argument, and they have yet to convince me otherwise. Magnus says this is delayed in Latin, YouTube censorship. Coventry 301 says, greetings. You said a while back that London is the true secret capital of America. Please could you elaborate, as it piqued my curiosity? Thank you. What I would do, first of all, is I would seek out CP Gray's video on the secret city of London. Watch that as your first port of call. And you will see that the city of London has different laws to the rest of the country, and has had, in fact, going all the way back to even, I'm not sure when the actual start of it is, but I want to say it's even pre-Norman. You may want to check the dates. And for that reason, London is and always will be the true center of the pause, so to speak. Jacob says, a nation is a nation when it believes itself distinct from the people around it. Any combination of ethnic, geographical, and cultural values can do this. Yes, but you can't claim to be a nation displaced. You can't claim that England is in Botswana in the same way that you cannot claim that Rome is in Constantinople, because it's not.
If the English moved to Botswana, why would it not be in Botswana?
Okay, well then you've got two of the three. Then you've got the people and the culture, right?
Yeah.
But in the case of the Byzantines, you don't have any of them. They didn't have the culture. They didn't have the people.
I think I can try and create a better comparison for you. Okay, so let's not use the idea of English, but the idea of British. Okay, we have Wales, we have Ireland, we have Scotland. Let's say a king of England, I don't know, James II, decides to set up a new capital. Oh, I don't know, let's say it's in Wales. Due to some, again, foreign invasion, England is lost, but the rest of Britain remains, and it remains situated in that capital. I think that's probably the best analogy I can come up with as to what happened with the Roman Empire. They still associated with Byzantine. It had a legitimate authority, it had a legal existence, and it was set up under an English king, but it didn't control the heartlands in the way it used to. Rather than having some displaced entity, thousands of miles away like Botswana.
But not only that, the people who made up the imperial apparatus moved to Constantinople.
Exactly, and this would fit into my scenario where the English go and essentially colonize Ireland, Scotland, and Wales.
Like these are still the same ethnic Romans who have gone there. They intermarry with the local population, but that doesn't make them not Roman, because they are still those same people.
I mean, look at the centuries that Wales has been under English domination.
Yes, the same with Rome.
And you don't speak a word of Welsh.
Wales are still not English, are they? They
You
remain.
don't speak a word of Welsh, mate.
It doesn't matter. They remain Welsh.
Based on what?
Geography.
Certainly not genetics.
Geography.
Like, the admixture is mad.
You see, there's three. If you can imagine a tick box with three criteria, you can tick any one of them, right? But you need to have one. And what I'm saying is, Byzantine Empire didn't have any. It had zero.
We've already demonstrated that.
Lies.
Just like the Marxists.
The Earl of
Nothing penetrates.
the Earl of Longford says Irish and Jewish diaspora. The Earl of Longford.
I can see why.
The Earl of
why he
Longford.
was so angry.
The Earl of Longford says Irish and Jewish diaspora. Terry Pratchett, Book Nation, makes good argument for it, being culture and tradition. Also, AA support the elevation of aristocracy. DRT is King says the better question is the Falklands English? If you stand in the Falklands, are you in England?
Yes.
Yes.
Mickey the Fourth. I'd say no.
Have you ever seen a picture of the Falklands?
I'd say no. I'd say you would. You're not, and also you're not if you're in Gibraltar. You're in the Falklands or Gibraltar.
Okay, but I've been to Gibraltar, and my father served in the Falklands, not in the war, but you do tours of duty on there, and you couldn't describe it as being of any other country. It wouldn't make sense, and no one would believe you. If you just Google a picture of the Falklands, and it looks like just some regular street from a regular town in England with red telephone boxes and the same street signs. It's all the same, and it's all English-speaking people who have moved there from England. And so
I don't know, Carl. It's pretty close to Argentina. I think Las Malvinas.
Sorry, I don't. Yeah. Sorry, no. I don't recognize the colonial designation. No, hang on. I don't recognize the colonial designation of Argentina. The proper name is the West Falklands. So, where were we? Right. So the Falklands proper are definitely English, and the West Falklands are English in potential. As in, we'll get to it.
I'm just looking at some pictures of the Falklands now to see what you're. Okay, all right. Okay, you could play a Smith soundtrack on that and pretend you're in England, I suppose.
Pretend.
All right.
But again, you're how are you defining what the thing is, though? Because it seems to be sort of Plato's form.
I suppose, in fairness, you've got 2 out of the 3 there, don't you? You've got the people, which is the blood, and you've got the culture. So maybe you don't need the location then, because you've got 2 out of the 3.
Yeah. So bringing up Argentina is interesting because there is a huge West Falklands. Sorry, Carl. There is a huge population of Welsh there. In fact, there are more Welsh-speaking people in West Falklands than there are in Wales.
True.
So
True.
So are they Welsh or are they Argent? I mean, are they? Yeah.
I think.
Are the Welsh in Wales?
I think you'll find. I think
if you have 2 of the, I think if you have 2
descendants of the Romans, that Argentina is the new Rome.
If you have 2 of the 3, if you've got the people who are clearly like ethnically of the place, and you've got the culture, then you can probably transport it, right? You can say, okay, well, we'll set up England in the Falklands then, okay? You don't need the geography. But if you don't have 2 out of the 3, and as I demonstrated, you had, quote unquote Roman emperors walking around,
quote unquote. Explain.
Not speaking in the tongue of the Romans, but speaking some other language.
You never
adopting the ways of the Romans. Not adopting the ways of the Romans, doing their own kind of culture.
Radicalizing me, AA, for the love of God.
There we go.
Okay, let's carry on.
And also, I seem to have triggered a small Welsh hobbit in the chat. I'm sorry, Owain.
Where are we? Gosh, I've lost now.
Purgatory, that's where we are.
There are quite a few super chats here. I have to find them now. My gosh. I was quite impressed by how English the Falklands look, though. That was quite good. That's the most convincing point you've made, Sargon. That the Falklands look quite English.
The Constantinople looked quite Roman in the same way.
No, it didn't, though, did it?
Yes, it did.
Let's go to Dee's argument of the architecture.
It was literally Rome. They called it the Second Rome, Nova Rome.
Look at the architecture.
Hey, have you heard of the Circus Maximus? Do you realise the same building was essentially transplanted and was the main focal point for the city?
They used the same goddamn architects. It was their empire. They were building a new city.
And the Theodosian walls looked like the Aurelian walls of Rome.
Constantinople had very distinctive art styles and architecture, which was not
because it was ancient. It lasted for over 1,000 years. But when the Romans built it, it just looked like a new Rome, which is what they called it. They didn't get the name Constantinople till way down the line.
It's like a McDonald's franchise by the sounds of it. Okay, so let's carry on going.
Yeah, it is.
Mickey IV said, blood was very important to the Romans, blood of the Roman family. They did not see themselves as ethnicity, family, and owned land mattered. So you're saying the land mattered, And
No,
the blood mattered.
The land was owned by the blood.
So the blood and the soil mattered then.
To the Romans, yeah. But that soil didn't have to be. I mean, like, they would own places everywhere. Like,
That soil could be anywhere, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And the blood could be any blood. The blood could be any blood.
No,
and
the
soil
blood
could
had to be their family blood. The blood had to be their family blood, but they would own lots of soil.
Aminunus Melon says the cells in the human body change every 7 years. Should we rename ourselves?
Not all of the cells. That's not true. There are certain cells, including brain cells, that don't change every 7 years.
Lol, BTFO.
Mickey the Fourth says, yes, Rome was the idea of the universal empire with divine right to rule over all with just law. Mickey the Fourth says, entire AA premise of Roman nationhood is a straw man. Magnus says,
Correct.
AA's argument seeds of Americanism. Americanism?
Yes. Yeah, get wrecked.
Where's my Americanism? What's the Americanism in my argument?
The failure to be able to identify the holistic picture of what the Roman Empire
I gave you
was.
very stable definitions, and you failed to tick any of my three boxes.
You tried to give extremely legalistic, logical, legalistic, specific arguments to a thing that doesn't fit the argument itself. You can't
But
map
we
it
were
on.
also able to provide legalistic arguments in addition to the cultural
That is
arguments.
also true, which you rejected out of hand.
It was a very American style, I would agree.
Ludwig von Lamy says, well, does that make me American? I don't know. Ludwig von Lamy.
You tell us.
Because, I eat a lot of burgers. I style myself. I use American style logic, apparently. So does that make me an honorary American? I don't know.
Yeah, you have the girth. You have the girth of an American.
I'm very invested in their election. Ludwig von Lamy says, Sargon, Japan has a population of 127 million. If 40 million Chinese, 40 million Nigerians, 40 million Egyptians, 40 million Mexicans, and 40 million Italians move to Japan, is Japan still Japan?
Well, I mean, it's going to be culturally very confused, isn't it? But I'm not exactly an advocate of multiculturalism, so. But I think the Japanese would probably have to work very, very hard to incorporate them. I don't think it'd be possible. I think you'd end up getting colonies.
Your argument, though, is if they maintained the same legal structures, it would still be Japan.
Nope.
That was Keith's argument. Keith, that was your argument.
No,
So-
it wasn't. My argument was a combination.
Yeah, but
right.
I would support Keith by adding various cultural and familial, even, as well as various other sort of traditions. Again, the incorporation is possible, but when you get ridiculous numbers, obviously it doesn't happen.
Jedi Knight Anna Quinn Cringewalker says, by 400 AD, before the sack of Rome, the city's population had already dropped to a few thousand. The bureaucracy had moved east. Household Dog says, why did Plato's chicken cross the road? Emily Nephilim says, is Chinatown China? Booyakasha, Emily, with high
Hang
IQ.
on, what is Chinatown if not an extension of China?
Is Chinatown China?
Well, what does it look like? France? Wales? Is it merry old England? Of course, it looks like China. It's populated by Chinese people doing Chinese things, speaking Chinese. Oh no, this is very English.
Is Chinatown China?
That's the point of it. That's how we identify it. We call it Chinatown.
This is madness.
Yeah,
Okay.
They don't have
I think
Chinatowns in
March front
China.
of it too,
Let's
right?
go around the panel with this. This is madness. I'm not accepting this. Chinatown in London is in London. The Chinatown in San Francisco is in San Francisco, and the one in New York is part of New York. They're
Why
not
call them
China
Chinatown.
because there's loads of
There is a
Chinese.
component of this argument which I accept, but I actually don't use this argument because when it comes to Constantinople in particular, there were large foreign quarters there. There were the Venetians, there were the Genoese, etc., involving actually a famous massacre there. And I don't accept that these were essentially enclaves of Venice and Genoa and any other sort of thing other than the cultural sense. Legally, Chinatown would exist within England, but of course that doesn't really matter anyway because Rome existed legally as Rome.
I find this a very odd. I find it a very odd argument to claim that Chinatown is China.
Well,
It's
2 out of the
Chinese,
3.
right? It's Chinese, but it's not China.
Just
Well,
because a
what
place
is
smells
Chinese-
like prawns and is filled with rude people who
Well, no,
push
look-
you around the streets doesn't make it China.
So the if we're using Scruton's 3 categories, I think that what we have is essentially all is required is 2 out of 3 to essentially complete the third, right? So in the case of the Falklands, it was the traditional inheritance and the legal sort of cultural. What were the 3 categories apart from geography? What were the other 2?
So, well, ideology, geography, the blood,
Ethnicity.
the blood.
So yeah, the ethnicity. So the tradition. Yeah. So you have 2 of those in the Falklands, but you don't have the geography. And yet, when you're looking at the Falklands, the Falklands, they look just like a piece of England to you, right? So the pressures of the 2 change the third, I think, is a fair way of looking at this. And so if you've got enough pressures to create the third part, then I think it's fair to call it that.
I
so
actually
if
do-
you've got you've got people of Chinese heritage and they are creating something that ends up looking like China, okay, they don't have the geography of China, but they have the traditions, the cultural inheritance, and they have the ethnicity. Well, that is an extension of China. But the thing is, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not bad.
I think we've hit on the fact, though. What's the difference between Chinatown and the Falklands? And it is the government, isn't it? The Chinese in Chinatown still have to use, well, if they're in London, they have to use pounds. If they're in New York, they have to use dollars. And if somebody sues them, they go to an American court or a British court here, right? Whereas in the Falklands, they have government essentially derived from our government in London, right? The jurisdiction is part of British jurisdiction. So that is important. So I would say Falklands is more towards being England than Chinatown is towards being China. And that is a step towards accepting part of Keith's argument. Okay.
But what happens when you start importing Sharia law and religious police into your nation, and that starts to become a part of your official governmental?
And then
it doesn't even have to be official. They can be unofficial, like the Sharia courts. Like the Sharia courts don't have any force in law, but you can bet your fucking ass that loads of these people in these communities respect them as if they did. So, what then?
I will carry on. That was a good super chat though. Is Chinatown China? All the top philosophical ones on this. I'm glad this is a kind of festive New Year stream, I guess. Where are we? Okay, so Sargon, not your fan, but my boy, you nailed it, says Michael Crow.
Well, thank you. Maybe you should reconsider.
Sam153 says, just got here, but can't wait to hear the arguments on replay. 30 Canadian dollars. Thank you very much for that. When he says, the song lost its capital in the north, despite this geographic loss.
Yes.
The institutional contiguity meant the remaining land was still considered song.
Yes, I was thinking of actually bringing up this argument, but I didn't think it was actually necessary in the end. Northern China was occupied by the Mongols, the Jin dynasty, and essentially was conquered by the Yuan, but it existed as an entity in a different place for 200 years, and it was still Chinese.
I mean, is China Mongolia?
You tell us.
I don't
Well,
know.
you tell me. Well, I mean, was it not the case that I mean, people will have to remind me, but after Genghis Khan died, didn't he parcel out the kingdom to his 4 sons, and didn't they just kind of dissolve back into being China after a while?
No, not really. A grandson, Kublai Khan, actually established a Chinese dynasty ruled by Mongolians called the Yuan.
But the thing is, Kublai Khan was he was Mongol of descent.
Is that
right?
Okay.
So
So again, AA, is that Chinese or is that Mongol?
Well, you tell
No,
me. You're the ones who
was
you're
foreign.
the
No,
ones
no,
who
no.
were trying
It's
to
clear.
argue
It's clear to
the
me.
Byzantine Empire.
It was foreign it was a foreign occupation masquerading as Chinese. That's what it was. With the Roman Empire, there was a continuity in the people and the history that didn't exist with Yuan.
Was Kublai Khan not of a Chinese mother?
I don't actually know that.
I'm just checking.
I think the situation with the Mongolians is similar.
Oh no,
to
she was.
what
I think his
Alexander
mother
did.
was Mongolian.
Find that.
Yeah, she was a karate. Yeah, she was a great princess. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, he was of purely Mongolian stock.
And Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure dome degree. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Utis says this whole question is a reflection of Westerners seeing the death in their civilization, and wanting to believe even after its death it will continue.
Yep.
So spiritually, that's what you guys are doing. You're trying to say it doesn't matter if we have to flee to Croatia; we can recreate England there, right?
What choice are we going to have?
Yes, that sounds better than just whatever the alternative is.
You already did it once in America. We got you covered. Don't worry.
It'll just be
I've been moving
Anglo-Saxons
that
in the
too.
woods again. It's fine.
Journeyman says Sargon's idea of nationality is similar to that of someone arguing for gender fluidity, vague and without definitions, borders. Yes, thank you, Journeyman. This
You can't
is what
just self-identify as Roman. That's never our position.
Your
that's not our
position from the start was, if I self-identify as Roman, there Rome stands. That's
No,
basically
there has to
what
be
it
a
is.
continuity.
Even the successor empires who self-identified as Roman had some sort of legalistic or dynastic basis, like the Russians or the Ottomans.
Like they're not strangers who just liked the look of Rome and came over and decided to act like Romans.
They don't look very Roman to me. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says the background section of the EU Wikipedia starts with the Roman Empire. By Carl's definition, the EU is the restored Roman Empire. Exactly, Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker. Because it's continuity.
No. It might
Absolutely
be
not.
no. If you're going to claim any sort of, I don't know. First of all, that's nonsense. But if you're going to claim some sort of geography, maybe the Empire of the Carolingians is more appropriate. Definitely not the Roman Empire.
But that was AA's argument, not mine. My argument is not predicated on geography at all.
My argument's not predicated on geography. What I'm saying is, if you want to have a clear definition, it has to be one of those three things. And you guys didn't pick one of those three things.
Yes, but we didn't need to. We got all three of them.
You picked, quote, continuity as your
No, that was
your
the fourth
metric.
one. That was the fourth one. This is the idea of beyond a nation, but the idea of a legally continuous state. But it also satisfies.
But
these
materially
requirements
as
for nation.
well. In every respect, the Eastern Roman Empire was materially a continuation of the Roman Empire.
Precisely, yeah.
Not just it was in spirit, in law, and in material, including manpower.
DRT is King says, so if land that had been part of Rome from before Caesar, sure, if Britain fell and ruled the empire from Canada or the Falklands, it would be British.
Sure.
Yes. In fact, that was even hypothesized as a worst-case scenario of World War II.
Hence me saying, if the British government moved in exile to Hong Kong, it would still be British. It wouldn't be the English, the ethnic group of the English. It'd be the ethnic group of the Hong Kongese, whatever form of Chinese that is. But it would still be British, and it would still be the government.
It feels wrong to me. Instinctively, it feels wrong.
You started this argument saying you were going to win on facts and logic, and we would use pathos.
Yes, and I'm saying my instinct is my instinct is to say that is wrong. I haven't post hoc rationalized the reason for it yet.
That's even worse.
Look at all this.
You haven't even rationalized the reason yet.
Super chats.
You have become what you
just
thought.
my feelings say no.
So many
You're like,
super
you're the one
chats.
Let me tell you why it feels wrong. I'll tell you why it feels wrong.
Oh, please.
Right, you're in Hong Kong. You're eating crispy duck and prawns and so on. It smells of prawns. In fact, that was my experience of going to Hong Kong. I could barely breathe because the air is so thick with that.
It really does. I've been there as well. It really does smell.
And when I first got there, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna, I said to the person I was with, I'm not sure if I can stick this for 3 days. Like, how are we going to survive? I thought I was going to suffocate. Honestly, it's that strong prawn smell. Okay. All of these things are very distinctive to that place and that's people. Okay, so you'd have to replace the entire population of Hong Kong, as well as the government, to
Well, let me
turn
ask you.
Hong Kong
Let me
into
ask you a
England.
question. Let me ask you a question. You get really annoyed at the food vendors in Hong Kong, right? And say you're on a drunken rampage. You go and smash one of their food stalls up, saying, "Look, I hate prawns. I'm sick of them." The police don't just beat your head in and then disappear you forever and leave you in a cell to rot. Is that a Chinese characteristic, or is that a British characteristic?
Um, I have to think about that. I have to think about it. I'll have to think about it because we're getting to the point. But you're getting to the point where you're saying, "Oh well, just get some Chinese guards to act in a civilized way," and that makes it English, which just doesn't sound very convincing to me.
There's no intonation there that you're giving it, right? You're giving this kind of an intent that is just not present. Well, what I'm saying is that Hong Kong is a product of Britain colonizing the world, right? And so you can't separate it from the history of Britain. That you just can't do it. And so if the British government were to move to Hong Kong, you're right, they wouldn't be in England, but they would still be the British government by continuity of the history of Britain.
Hey, can I ask you a question, just out of curiosity? Do you associate Italy with Rome?
No, I mean, I would say Italy has got a rather interesting history of city-states, and what's the guy's name? Mazzini, and bringing who's the guy who brought it all together as a nation?
Garibaldi.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, the idea of Italy and Italians is a tricky one, I would say. There, I would say regionality comes into play in a bigger way than it may do in some other nations.
I would agree with you.
The differences between North and South there are probably even bigger than they are in this country.
Yeah.
It's also like the question of are the current inhabitants of Greece, are they a continuation of Greece? And no, I mean they're not. They're not the same people at all.
Who are the people who are currently in Greece?
The current
Greece.
Is
that
current
fair?
Greece.
I'm not sure if that's fair.
Balkans.
I would say that there is a very big difference there, as far as I know.
The
Perhaps
people
I'm wrong.
currently in Greece are just like the genetic leftovers of Europe.
I mean, I disavow. I mean, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to keep on going with this. Harris Remen says Justinian the Great spoke Latin.
You did.
Yeah, but I had Justinian the Second there. Justinian the Second wasn't great, was he? He had a metal nose. Got his ass kicked.
No, that's Justin. You were saying, and Justin was Justinian the Great's father. So no, he didn't speak Greek. He spoke Latin.
No,
Well, he would
I
have
had a
spoken.
picture of Justinian the Second. They were just calling him Justin as a kind of nickname.
Oh, right.
you know,
Well,
kind
there
of
was no
slang,
Greek Justin, so get it confusing there. I know nothing about the bloody nose.
Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says Hong Kong was founded by the British. There was no city there before. It is British. They speak English in the Hong Kong Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Patrick says, yeah, but nobody who went to Hong Kong would say it's England. Nobody would. They can have
Well, it's
exactly
not
the same
England.
governmental style, and you can have that continuity there, but it doesn't matter. If you've been to Hong Kong, in fact, I would go as far as to say I'm a pretty well-traveled chap. I have never experienced such a culture, what do they call it? Culture shock, as I did when I arrived in Hong Kong. Partly because I was expecting it to be more kind of familiar than it was. And it was one of the strangest places I've ever been. I don't know if anybody else has been to Hong Kong, but I found it like pretty culturally different rather than similar. It was like, shit, we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy.
It also
Basically.
depends on where you go in Hong Kong, but yes, I mean,
Whereas I've been to places like in deepest, darkest, like the deep south in America, for example, where I went to like a little tea room in Missouri, right? And I was like, okay, this is weird, but also it was more familiar. Like it was more familiar. So in a strange way, the deep south is closer to England than Hong Kong is, in my experience, right? Because and who knows what the reasons for that is, right? But I would say that neither of them were England. Patrick says this basically comes down to will to identity and or place, and why were you using the definition of nation to define an empire? I mean, I would say that as a valid point.
That is a valid point, and I have
nation empire thing.
Yeah, I've tried not to associate the idea of a nation and empire as being synonymous. Hence, the legal conception of empire. I mean, even just turning to what the Romans referred to themselves as, I think there's a difference between being Romanos in the sense that you are a denizen of the city of Rome, as opposed to the Romaioi, or I know this is going to sound even more confusing, but Romanian is an etymology that could be referred to them.
DRT is king, so if a land has been part of Rome from before Caesar, no, we did that one. George says, where do Carl and AA stand on the question of the ship of Theseus? Also, Eritrea is a graphic illustration of what we lost when Chaz was shut down.
Well, the ship of Theseus is exactly the question that we're answering and discussing here. I'm on the side of, yes, it is the ship of Theseus, because, again, it comes down to the continuity of the item. Whereas AA is saying, no, it was the planks of wood that made it special. I disagree. I think that the ship of Theseus is about what the meaning we imbue into it. And the purely materialistic view that is the planks of wood that make up the ship is kind of... I don't know, outing him as a secret communist, I think, really.
White Raven.
I'm so glad I managed to get that in there, actually.
Hold on a second. Yeah, White Raven 7278 says, the problem here is the Rome that AA is talking about stopped existing once they adopted the Greek gods, which was before even Caesar. They stopped existing once their first emperor wasn't born in Rome.
Well, now we're approaching one of the dumbest things said on this amazing stream.
Well, it's dumb on multiple levels because the Romans inherited their gods through the Etruscans as well as from the Greeks. So by that definition, Rome never existed at all.
Based.
Panama Hat says, a powerful return to form after months of unwatchable election ananasy. So another classical debate. Was Greco-Roman bacteria Greek or Bactrian?
Definitely Bactrian.
Benjamin Root says the best unpopular opinion since 1453. Owen Kapler says, with AA's geography trumps all
Too
rule,
soon.
You have to say that modern Italy is actually still the Roman Republic because it has the same land ancestry.
Except for the Lombards.
Same city.
Same city.
Let me ask you a question.
Wait, can I point out?
Yeah,
sorry, I refer to the modern Italian state as the ultimate LARPers. Honestly, come on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Italian reunification is just a total failure.
I know.
Why did
Same as Germany, really?
Mussolini draw on the idea of Rome in his ideology?
Well, it was completely false, as was proven by how useless the Italians were in the Second World War.
Why did he do what? AA, sorry?
Why did Mussolini draw on the mythology and the idea of Rome in his myth making?
I mean, what else do Italians have going for them?
Yeah, what else is he going to say?
Well, any other sort of point in history, they would have to look again, like you said, AA, before regional history, because I honestly don't view, the modern unification of Italy as a success in any real sense. I mean, they have to point to something again like Rome, which is really the only precedent of united Italy, other than going to the Ostrogoths, which doesn't really count.
So you're saying it was just made up? It was fake? There's no continuity.
Italian nationalism. In a sense, again, I don't buy it. I just think it's a conglomeration of regions. I mean, like Metternich said, it's just a geographical expression.
So Mussolini was LARPing, but the dude in Constantinople in 1215 was not LARPing, in your view?
Yes.
Well, considering 1215, the Byzantine Empire was usurped by the Latins, that doesn't really apply.
Owen Kapler says, Narco Republican says, I'm going to destroy your arguments with facts and logic. Proceeds to attack some random Quora posts while taking foundations for debunking. Well, I did. I mean, I did say at the outset,
Using his feelings.
I was never going to take this debate seriously, as I told you. But I still think we've uncovered some interesting things, like along the way, right?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Yes,
Rome
is the friends. Rome is the friends we made along the way. Yeah.
And speaking of friends like Italy in the First World War, I'm officially switching sides to the Byzantium is Rome. I'm on team winner here.
Oh, brilliant.
Murdoch Hancock says Anglo land belongs to the Celts' blood and soil. Get out, you German interlude.
Come and fucking take it.
Keith Ray says, weren't the first Romans Greek immigrants? Of course, Eastern Rome is Roman. Magnus says AA is an obvious Sasanian propagandist and should be thrown out and laughed at for his attempt.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, the pernicious Sassanid blood flows in your veins.
Khosrau II is alive and well.
Yeah.
Mickey the Fourth says, if the British Empire still existed, Hong Kongers would call themselves the subjects of the British Empire. No, they would not be English. Nation X Empire FFFS. He's saying that nation and empire aren't the same thing. Mighty Balzac says, those who call themselves the Romans, they go to the house, foundations of Latin when. I can reveal that there will be no foundations of Latin. I can also reveal that foundations of logic, when it does come, will be a serious course, and not a kind of mess around as I have done. I have just played with logic in this debate rather than actually demonstrated it. Utiz says a trans man thinks of himself as a man, therefore he is a man. A Byzantine and a Byzantine is a Roman. Perhaps Indians are British if they think it so. Yes. What do you have to say about
transitioned? That? They were never not that thing. So a woman who thinks of herself, a female who thinks of herself as a woman, has always been a female. A Byzantine is actually the thing you're trying to transition them into.
Patrick says this basically comes to. We did that one. Okay. Animus Mellon says Rome is a gestalt entity, a kind of betweenness that emerges from multiple factors, but cannot be reduced to any one of them. Context is important. I mean, would you agree with that comment?
I think you could say that for any national or ethnic group. Any kind of culture, really.
Narco Republican says this moving on sounds like we won the argument. I mean, have you never seen me in a debate before? I always say moving on. Just trying to end the stream. Dusty Time says, why is a blood and soil argument so controversial?
Because Nazis.
I mean, when they were talking about the Third Reich, were they LARPing as well, do you think? What was their continuity there with the...
very little continuity. I mean, like the idea, again, of Germany as a consolidated, centralized state. I mean, I don't think there's ever really been a historical precedent for that, ever. Not even, going back to ancient history.
Yeah, Germany is probably one of the greatest failures of all time in terms of trying to create a coherent nation state out of a land area.
Froggy says, what about the Falklands? Oh, I think we've talked about that. Because it's 167 says, blood and soil is just an idea, man.
Checkmate.
I mean, that's not true, though, is it? There is objectively a mountain, and there are objectively bloodlines, as I've talked about.
The very notion of objectively is just an idea.
The Earl of Longford says, had the exact same conversation with an American, offended by suggesting my Australian friend is an Aussie, despite growing up here. The word has different meanings, depending on the context, legality, culture, language, and ethnicity. Recon Conquista UK says, the globalization of Rome begins with the aftermath of the social war in the late Republic. First, the Italian allies, and increasingly others, drop a Roman from the time of Cincinnatus in Augustus's principate, and he becomes a stranger. Do you agree with that?
And horrified. Cincinnatus famously stepped down from the dictatorship and went and became a farmer after being the dictator of Rome. This is why Cincinnati is named after him. right? To then drop him 500 years in the future and be like, oh, here's a Principate, by the way. So a perpetual dictator rules over Rome. He'd be furious. It would be like George Washington being dumped 200 years in the future now and finding that America had a king.
Opera Grupafura John Smith says, just wondering why some of your live streams have gone behind a paywall. Specifically, Cigar Stream 58, Kennedy election, and Cigar Stream 60, Weimar Republic. Well, John Smith, all of the streams go behind a paywall after a certain amount of time. And there are different tiers, and you get the back episodes if you belong to different ones. I think Unpopular Opinions is on the lowest one, and the Cigar Stream is on the next one up. So, yes. Ace Ventura says, is Christianity Roman? It started in Rome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a argument you could be made that it wasn't actually technically the first Christian state. Armenia was, but Nicene Christianity, as we understand it, which gave us Orthodoxy and Catholicism, and therefore Protestantism and everything that came after it, started in the Roman Empire.
And you really, I think you call it Greek. It seems to be a Greek reading of Eastern religion.
John Smith says the links work fine after about a week, but then all of a sudden, anytime you play the video, you would get the message, this is available to channel members only. So the streams are typically available for a week or two, and then they go behind the paywall. It's been like that for ages now. The best time to watch the streams is, if you don't want to become a channel member, is either try to catch them live or catch it on the replay within the week. Lucius Brutus says Byzantines were Roman. Timothy Mayer says you can be Iranian Shia Muslim raised in London, England, living in Houston, Texas for decades. These cultures are not and can't be mutually exclusive. Jedi Knight Anna Quinn Cringewalker says Venice is in Italy, conquered Constantinople, speaks Latin and was a republic. There is no way to deny their Romanness. The emperor even admitted this. Wan He says the song lost its capital in the north, despite this. Oh, we did that one. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, how many members of the panel are trucks?
Honk.
Benjamin Rood says, joking aside, this is by far the best you owe in more than a year.
No.
I mean,
Is it that bad?
I'm not sure about that. Reconquista, you say, it says all of AA's arguments against Byzantium also apply to the Roman Empire from the time of Augustus.
Yep.
Why is that then? Why do all of my arguments against Byzantium apply to Augustus? Tell me.
Well, you made the argument, didn't you, that I think it was one of the supposed low IQ takes you took up, that the empire become Easternized and it become monarchical when you have this idealized conception of Rome as a republic.
Yes, but Augustus had a trump that was lacking by the Justins.
Cincinnatus wouldn't recognize it.
Augustus had a trump.
Wouldn't recognize it. Tarquin wouldn't
What
recognize
was
it.
Right.
The only thing you have left
Billy,
is the
Billy,
geography.
you at the back there. What was the trump that Augustus had that was lacking with Justinian and all those other guys? What was the trump that Augustus had? Anyone? He was sitting in Rome.
Justinian owned Rome.
Murdoch Hancock says, look at Teddy Roosevelt.
By the way, the trump card applies very well to Belisarius if you're going to bring up the Byzantines.
Literally, Justinian reconquered Rome.
Murdoch Hancock says, look at Teddy Roosevelt. No room in this country for hyphenated American speech. It is very interesting. It's interesting. I haven't read that speech, but maybe we'll look at it in another stream. The Earl of Longford says, Sargon conceding gender study professors are right. I mean, it's kind of...
Again, there's no continuity between a male being a male and then saying I'm a female. Like, that's a break in the continuity. And that's not what occurs in the Byzantine Empire. So it's actually the opposite. You're the one suggesting that, I think. I'm suggesting the opposite.
DRT is King says, Imperator Carl 1, Ave Sargon, glory to the Akkadian. I hope AA enjoyed living in the Kingdom of London since the capital is important. Base Kinker 14 says, is Liberia a continuity of the USA? Anyone?
I mean, it was a product of the USA. Like, I mean, it depends what sense you mean continuity, but it's an independent state, and I think it was founded as an independent state, wasn't it? It wasn't meant to be like an imperial American holding or anything.
Zumatia says, Bob Dylan cigar stream when? Well, I don't think ever, but the Deepest Law would be a very good venue for Bob Dylan. I have a theory that there is a lot of reactionary elements in Bob Dylan's lyrics, even going back to the 60s. And so there could be many, many Bob Dylan streams. So, yes, I wouldn't rule out doing a Deepest Law. However, the other day, Pharaoh sent me about like 20 ideas for Deepest Law streams. So maybe we'll work through all of them first and then do a Bob Dylan one. Jedi Anakin Cringewalker says, the Greek city-state conquered by Mehmet II was not Roman. The Eastern Roman Empire conquered by the French was, and France inherited it by conquest.
Too simple.
99 Iron Duke says, I mean, presumably Keith agrees with that to some extent, surely, because...
Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening.
Yeah, he says the Greek city-state conquered by Mehmet II was not Roman. The Eastern Roman Empire conquered by the French was, and France inherited it by conquest.
It's the total opposite of his position.
Conquered by the French? It wasn't conquered by the French. It was conquered by a multinational force under the leadership, ultimately, of the Venetian fleet. And to just call it French, I mean, that's like calling, the Kingdom of Jerusalem French or whatever. It doesn't suit the time whatsoever.
I think it actually has a better claim.
Yeah.
Timothy Mayer says the US dollar has descended from the Holy Roman Empire by way of Bohemia and Spain. Therefore, American currency is Roman and America is Rome.
Based.
Yes.
99 Iron Duke says Eastern European General Belarusius reconquered Rome for the Romans in 536 AD.
He did.
Jedi Knight Anna Quinn Cringewalker says, as Constantine was elected emperor by the British, not the Senate, and then he moved the capital east, the Byzantine Empire is thus not Roman, but British.
It is, starting York.
Brian H. says, Botswana can be English without being England. Lord Albine says, Mr. D, cookbook when?
Oh, again, another one. All right.
Owen Kapler says, I'm going to make a video summarizing this debate and the problems I saw from both sides. Can I super chat on super videos promoting it?
Why would you do that?
Owen Kapler. Okay, but that's the only super chat I will read as regards this stream. Okay, no others, unless you're going to also make a video. But I do not want to start a trend of videos on this topic. Earl of Longford, and I don't want to see AA owned by Sargon of Akkad in the
destroyed.
Carl's only ever debate win. No, I'm joking.
Oof.
The Earl of Longford says, Your Majesty, if England is lost, I'm coming to invade Wales and Scotland to impose my language, religion, tradition, and distinct genes. Tichot Allah. Recon Kagisa UK says neither genetics nor culture, but ancestral, physical, and cultural inheritance, permitting the odd adoption and acquisition. Correct. Architect of Fate says, in fact, I mean, I don't want to mention this now, but I might do a stream on Hobbit, Lord of the Rings soon as well, because many interesting things have emerged watching this time round.
Dude, I can't believe you have anything positive to say about The Hobbit.
Well,
I mean,
I'm thinking less in terms of reviewing the films and more in terms of some of the things they threw up. For example, did Bilbo going on the quest effectively take the Shire from him in his own mind? Because when he goes back, he's obviously changed and he can't associate with the people around him.
Yeah, he got bathed and red pilled.
He's changed forever, basically. But the question is, right? Bilbo loves the Shire with all his heart, but he's forever changed, and therefore can't like love it as he used to when he goes back because
Well,
he's
that's the central beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, isn't it? You know, he longs for adventure. He's written the Unexpected Tales. He's going off to live in Rivendell. So
Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it.
It's
There is
just an interesting question. Like, if you took, let's say, you took Morgoth, right, and who loves the Shire, and you sent him on an adventure around the world, and he came back, like, would that rob him of the thing that he loved, even though he wanted to get back there? Because his
Not if he's
adventures
done
are
it voluntarily.
kind of, it's kind of an interesting question.
Well, no, to take something away from someone implies a will behind it, and if the will is his own, then what he did is voluntarily gave it up, but through ignorance, I guess you'd say.
Let's have a look. Architect of Fate says, Sargon, I understand how the last German Führer felt in Mein Kampf. AA, you're wrong. Rome is blood, soil, and culture. Jedi Knight
It's the city of Rome.
Jedi Knight Anakin Grinchwalker says, Korea surprisingly preferred trade with the Byzantines and Japan over China. It imported cataphracт armor, swords, food. The crown was also Byzantine in origin. Therefore, Korea is the true heirs of Rome.
Based.
Kalja says, you made Carl identify with the Austrian pater, AA, deviously played.
Not identifying with him, but I just didn't understand what he was talking about. I was like, no one could be so impervious to reason as to literally drive a man to genocide, and suddenly I've met someone who's that impervious to reason.
Owain says, whilst there is a successful Welsh colony in the West Falklands, Wales still has far more Welsh speakers. The true heirs to the Western Rome, Cambria Eternium. Ian Jordian Sivo says, you also require the centres of culture creation. Eastern Rome had major urban centres that supported the creation of new culture, which is how it evolved away from its pagan past. Ian Giorgio Silvio also says, the Falklands are British, but they would not remain so for long if England became Muslim, because they don't have sufficient native culture creation to carry it forward. Not the case with Eastern Rome. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, is my local kebab shop a
Very good, very good.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Any answers to that question?
That's probably Turkish.
Narco Republican says continuity is important, but at what point is California no longer American? Discriminatory laws, decadent values, inclusive language, and foreigners.
Well, incidentally, I think the people who say, well, America is an idea are actually doing everyone a great service without realizing it. Because if America is an idea, then what it is an idea of republicanism, which is predicated on the idea of private property rights, which means that if America as an idea is to survive, any ideas that go against private property rights should actually be stamped out with extreme prejudice and essentially considered treason, right? It should be, if America is an idea, then any philosophies that would seek to overthrow the American Republic or the idea of property ownership on which it's founded are treasonous. And so California has essentially seceded.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I hope it does. I want USA to split in two at this point.
No, I don't want it to split. I want to reconquer all of it.
Or conquer
exactly.
California. Okay.
We need an American Justinian.
All of this balkanization nonsense is a bunch of crap. I refuse to cede any territory to commies or otherwise.
Yeah.
Hussein Badachankai says, if you don't recognize Wurzel Gummidge, you aren't British. This is why West China declared independence from Lundistan. Has anybody seen that new Wurzel Gummidge, by the way? That's scary. He looks more like what's that pirate film with bloody what was the pirate? The Pirates of the Caribbean. Yeah, he looks like something out of Pirates of the Caribbean. I watched a bit of that the other day, and there's also like a woman in it who's like the front of a ship. It's very strange. Mickey the Fourth says the Greeks today are all over the place. There are still some remnants. I have a Greek friend who traces his noble family heritage 700 years back. Ludwig von Lammy says, question for the panel. When indigenous Brits become an ethnic minority in Britain in 2066, will Britain still be British? Will
According
Britain
to
still be
AA.
Britain? Can anyone be British? Well, hold on. You say according to AA. I said there were 3 criteria.
Moving on.
By the
Jedi Knight
way,
Ana-
99 Iron Duke has said that he sent a $10 super chat and you missed it.
Oh my gosh, how am I going to find that?
I don't know, but
here
he
we
seemed
go.
quite put out by it.
Yeah, he says Emperor Emperor Caracalla Emperor Caracalla made all free men in the Roman Empire Roman citizens. Educated Romans always spoke Latin and Greek. The Eastern Roman Empire was Roman, he says.
True.
Yeah, that's correct.
Damn it. There needs
By
to
the
be
way,
more
this
people on my side.
By the way,
Yeah.
this happened 300 years before the supposed end of the Western Roman Empire.
Yeah.
This was
And despite the
212.
fact that Caracalla was described as the common enemy of mankind.
But he was also from Libya, where his father, Septimus Severus, was. So
Yeah.
was he Roman?
Yeah. Kind of
All
hard.
of you.
knows?
You know what? This
Very
whole
nice
stream,
cluster.
this whole stream is me pointing out straight facts, and you all with a QI klaxon, smugly laughing as like Stephen Fry. You know, this is all of you. Whereas
This is all
actually,
projection,
What's-
AA.
What's it like
The
to be?
real
Was
answer
is it
is
Alan
me.
Dale?
Alan
okay.
Davis.
Alan Davis, that's it.
Yes.
I like Alan.
Tony says Mexican living in the US makes me American, not Mexican. We Americans are not Brits. That's why we had to beat you back. Yeah, exactly. Take that. Jacob says
Cope.
Tony can F off with his proposition nation nonsense. The US was British ethnically and is British in law.
I mean, that's true.
Yeah, mostly. It's not British ethnically
Not
anymore.
now, but yeah. Not much of it is, yeah.
PH Divius Aurelianus says Carl is right. See Roman land by Caldalis. See Ando for imperial prop plus mutual ideological investment in the empire. AA doesn't understand late empire and Romanus over time. Very anachronistic and then he's just put grad student. No, he's a grad
Correct.
student. Sorry. Okay. Chris Lutiu says, AA, please turn this into a series. Next, prove that America isn't British. I am not turning this into a series. Jedi Knight Anakin Gringe Walker says, World War One Central Powers with the reunification of Rome. Harris Raymond says, are Pakistanis and Bangladeshis Indians? What about that then?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Are Pakistanis and Bangladeshis Indians?
You see, I would say yes, because I don't. Again, I think it's a tragedy that Pakistan and Bangladesh are separated from India based on Islam, considering that Muslim dynasties ruled over India for the majority of the last millennia.
I mean, I'd ask an even bigger question. Is India like a real thing? Is it like because
the modern state of India?
Yeah, well, because my understanding is from most of its history, India was a bit like what we're talking about with Italy, like separate regions, separately governed, separate kings, separate regions. So,
Well, it was, I mean, almost. It was almost unified before the British came over under the Mughals, but ironically, it was the British who united India, really.
Murdoch Hancock says Rome has a similar history to the Australia. Its ethnicity was made up of Etruscans, Samnites, and Sabines. What made it Rome was its idea of the citizen.
Fucking Roman Empire, mate, you cunt.
Jedi Knight Hannah Gringe Walker says, unrelated, but McConnell just introduced a bill. McConnell just introduced
Carthaginian emus, mate. Came over
Unrelated.
Sorry.
Unrelated, but Mitch McConnell just introduced a bill. $2,000 for everyone if a fraud council is established. either honeypot or suicide.
What?
Hold on. Mitch McConnell did that. Traitorous Turtle Mitch did that. I don't believe it. I want that substantiated. I don't see it breaking all over my Twitter feed. Tell me about this, McConnell. I may have to do a Rumble update in a minute if that's true.
I hate to say, but I mean, some of us have lives to live. So can we please wrap this up?
Ian just said this has been torturous, D, hasn't it? Ian Gideon Sivo says, one of the reasons the Romans quickly lost much of Italy after Justinian's conquest is that the Roman landowners had their land reinstated and they forced the peasants to pay all their missed taxes. Nicholas Purencaro says, will Trump succeed the presidency? What do you guys think? I don't think he's going to concede personally, but we're already going late, so... I mean, I'll just very quickly ask Sargon, do you think Trump is ever going to concede?
I don't know. I am in a position where I just don't want to make predictions because who fucking knows?
Well, we're going to find out very soon.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just watch the roller coaster.
It's very exciting and popcorn worthy.
Best reality TV show ever.
Owen Kapler says, thanks AA for doing this debate. Sorry for all the super chats harassing you about the Eastern Romans. My video analysis will be balanced and based. Thank you very much, Owen Kapler. I mean, when you're making that analysis, please bear in mind that I very arbitrarily picked my position without caring about this topic whatsoever. I don't know if anybody could tell. But hopefully I still raise some good points just because, but maybe not. Maybe it was just straight transit. The people will decide. Herdock Hancock says, no, AP will decide, and they already did decide. They called it for me. Hancock Murdoch says, Charlemagne, long live the Republic. God save these American states. Magnus says, Rome was founded by Trojan refugees. Is Roma really Roman?
No.
I mean, so you'd admit that it has a start, right? Just in the same way that I said France has a start. So Martin Callender says, you should read Conanite's History of the Fourth Crusade. The similarity between Andronicus and Trump is increasing by the day, and that's a real black pill.
Which Andronicus?
It says Choniates? Nicetas Choniates?
Is he talking about Titus Andronicus, the Shakespeare play? I know it from that. But Thug Life Bear says, I will have turtle soup before I trust Mitch McConnell. I mean, if that news is true, it is absolutely shocking. I mean, I literally made a video the other day saying that Mitch McConnell will never be a great man because he's a coward, essentially. But so that would be genuinely, genuinely shocking if there's a council on fraud set up by him. And Benjamin Rood says, sic transit gloria. So there we go. What does that mean?
Thus goes the glory of the world.
Yeah, he forgot the Mundi part.
Yeah, he did forget the Mundi.
Thank you very much, everyone, for that. Any shilling to come? And anybody got anything they want to shill? Sargon?
Yeah.
Lotus Eaters?
Yeah, go to lotuseaters.com if you want good content. Interesting articles and lots of book reviews and various other things that we work very hard on.
Yes, it's going very well from what you tell me. The Lotus
It seems to be
Eaters.
going great. Yeah. We were the sixth most downloaded podcast in Britain in the news category on Apple the other day.
Just cannot wait until you beat Woman's Hour.
I know. Like this is.
Yeah, I
got to
saw
beat
that.
Woman's Hour.
I think
we're doing very well.
Do you think that when you leapfrog Woman's Hour, that you'll start seeing like hit pieces and stuff, or are you ready for that moment?
I mean, it wouldn't be anything new, would it? You know,
maybe to really rub it in, you could have a woman on, do a woman's hour.
Jesus, well,
you should do. You should genuinely. You should do a Woman's Hour with like Helen Dale. Just get together like a base women's panel.
Yeah.
There are no based women, AA.
Based.
No, Helen Dale's pretty based.
I met Helen Dale. She is
She's great, isn't she?
quite like, how can I say this? I don't mean this very.
Statuesque.
She's a imposing character,
Yes.
and in fact, somebody who really loves Rome and Roman culture.
I was going to say, did she get into a very long discussion with Britisher about the Romans?
Oh, she loves.
Yeah, I seem to remember that.
I mean,
Well, she's written a series of novels that set in Rome if Rome never became Christianized, I think it was, and therefore never went through its industrial, never. In fact, no, if it went through an industrial revolution, but with Roman morals.
I mean, all I'll say is, without saying anything more, I would say that she in particular has hidden and deep levels of baseness that will surprise people, especially that Roman stuff. Because I mean, she's basically just like, yeah, society would be more eugenic basically if you lived by Roman principles, which is true. It's true, right?
Yeah. It'd be cool.
Yes, Charlemagne, you got anything to shill, mate?
Sure, I'll do my shilling. So, one, I started a Substack blog, charlemagne.substack.com. Two, I'm working on the script for my Pareto Burnham Circulation of Elites video that I sort of talked about on Millennial. I kind of, just idea dumped there. And I think I want to see us transition more into formal organizations and power structures, kind of like what Lotus Eaters is doing, right? That is the right direction to create formal structures. So I'm trying to come up with a plan to do something like that myself over the next 3 years. And I'm really going to start digging into some of the deeper influences behind neo-reaction like Burnham and get us out of, the right spends way too much time in this like metaphysical space. There's a lot of unfortunate like German worship, I think, going on as well, which is completely useless. And I really want to see us move towards practical and formal solutions to things.
What I'll say is, Charlemagne, when Foundations of Politics is done, I've had to delay that because I'm trying to get this trivium complete. Foundations of Logic next, and then Rhetoric next. And as anybody who's seen me debate knows, I need to learn more about rhetoric because that's the one part of my arsenal I'm not good at. But once I've done that, the politics course will, as I'm sure you're aware, focus pretty strongly on that tradition of Burnham and Pareto and Mosca and several other thinkers in that line, because I do think that they are the closest thing that you get to almost like how like Austrian economics is built on logic first and foremost, and is I think they build their arguments in a really similar way, almost so you've got like a kind of, I want to say like a kind of almost like a science of politics without any value. It's a value-free analysis. That's what I was looking for. A vert-free way of looking at politics.
Yeah, exactly.
And with politics, it needs to be that, right? Because
I mean, we have a lot of fun, but we really need to start taking things more seriously. Like the fun and games are coming to an end. One of the things I'm thinking about doing, I named the Substack Neo Reactor. I'm thinking about actually trying to create a like physical magazine over the next 3 years or so, kind of with an eye for what Saffron is doing with her ideas in that domain. So we'll see what happens, but I intend to continue to take things more seriously, and everyone needs to be doing that. We're way past the just chatting on YouTube phase of things.
Absolutely, you're right there, and I will support any efforts to get. I've long thought something like a journal or a magazine or something needs to get up and running. I've talked about doing it myself, but I think realistically, I'm not going to do that. So it'd be great to get someone else to do it, essentially. But I would help promote it, as I'm sure everybody else would as well. And the only thing I'll mention very quickly is that there is the sale on at the moment. So if anybody's buying any courses, you can save yourself 25% of the current cost using the code. What was it again? 12 days. It finishes on January the 6th. It's for the 12 days of Christmas. It's January, traditional January sale. So you can use that now. Keith, you got anything that you want to shell? I don't know if you.
I don't have anything going on. I just have a Twitter account if any strange person out there wants to follow me. But no, just thank you for having me on. It's been really fun.
And Dee, I know you want to go to bed or do anything else.
yeah, that's what I'm going to show is bedtime. See, but no, it was very interesting. Certainly listening to everything, and again, I don't. This isn't my sort of area of interest, but I think there was some good points brought up all round. So.
Yeah, and I'll just say very quickly, if you didn't catch it, Dee and I did a stream looking at footage of old London.
And Panama Hat.
Yeah, and Panama Hat, Dee and me, we looked at old London, and we also looked at like London in the 70s and the 80s. I find that a fascinating experience to do that. So if you missed it, just go back a few days and try to catch that, because I think people got something out of it. More super chats have come in. Damn it! I thought we were gonna get out of here. Okay, so very very quickly, Architect of Fate says France doesn't have a start, just like Marxism. France is a cancerous blight trying to destroy all the good that humanity created. Jedi Knight Anakin Gringewalker says Constantinople was merely the Romans retaking their Trojan homeland. True Rome is in the east. Martin Calendar says, "Oh, we did that one, didn't we?" And finally, Sensium Comenium says, "That's great news, Carl, about the Lotus Eaters. Now you can maybe pick the splinters out of your ass and get off the fence once and for all. Laugh, 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 laugh."
What am I on the fence about? I'm pretty forthright in my positions, I thought.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. People saying that AA lost are probably correct. Yeah, get out. Just get out. Forget this ever happened. Bye.